Chapter 1349. Time flew by. Unknowingly, the sect grand competition was about to begin. As the sect master, Chu Mu had to be present. This sect grand competition could be said to be the first sect grand competition for the true sword sect to rise again after suffering heavy losses. It had a certain significance and had to be done well. Before the sect grand competition began, Chu Mu had been thinking about what he was missing. He always had a feeling of pulling out the clouds to see the moon. However, the clouds were too stubborn and could not be pulled apart for a while. Separated by a layer of clouds, he could only vaguely see the moonlight. This vague feeling made Chu Mu feel that it was right but not right. When he entered the sword sect spirit seal again, he could not find Bai Ling. If he did not take the initiative to appear, Chu Mu could not do anything. Every day, he comprehended, practiced, and cultivated, increasing his strength little by little. The sect grand competition began. The sect master was present, as were the two elders, Yun Feng and Yun He. As a guest elder, Yang Zhen was also present. The sect grand competition this time was divided into 3 levels: official disciples, elite disciples, and core disciples. The official disciples were the most numerous, followed by the elite disciples, and the core disciples were the least, with only 20 or so. In order to motivate the disciples, the 3 levels of the inner sect tournament were arranged to compete together. Yun He was the referee for the official disciple competition, Yun Feng was the referee for the elite disciple competition, and Yang Zhen was the referee for the core disciple competition. Chu Mu was at the top, looking down from above. The competition followed the method of drawing lot. The winner would advance and the loser would be eliminated. It was simple and direct. The first to start was the competition between the official disciples. The other disciples were all reduced to spectators. The official disciples were the most numerous, but there were only a few hundred people. The first round was about 1 to 200 battles. It seemed like a lot, but it was actually not much. In one day, the first round was completed. Half of them advanced and half were eliminated. After the first round of the official disciples, it was the first round of the elite disciples. To everyone, they were still full of energy even if they did not sleep for a few days and nights. Therefore, the competition was carried out day and night. Every disciple's heart seemed to be burning with a flame. After the first round of the elite disciples was completed, it was the first round of the core disciples. Core disciples were all at the rebirth realm, and every single one of them possessed superb sword techniques and formidable strength. The battles between them were extremely enlightening to the official disciples and elite disciples. After the first round of the core disciples ended, it was time for the second round of the official disciples. They had completely recovered their energy and could fight to their heart's content. In this way, they took turns to fight in the competition. One batch was eliminated and another batch was promoted. The cycle continued. The rules of this sect grand competition were that the top 10 official disciples would be rewarded. The top 10 elite disciples would also be rewarded. As for the core disciples, because there were only 20 or so core disciples, it was impossible for the top 10 to be rewarded. Only the top 3 would be rewarded. Because this was the first official sect competition after the rise of the true sword sect, the rewards this time were quite generous. In particular, the rewards for the top 3 were even more enviable. Halfway through the competition, during the break, Chu Mu suddenly announced that there would be an additional reward for the top 3 contestants, which was to receive his swordsmanship guidance for a month. The true sword sect only cultivated the sword. Therefore, the disciples of the true sword sect were all swordsmen. If they could control sword energy, they would be sword cultivators. However, up until now, there had yet to be a sword cultivator who could control sword energy. They all knew that Chu Mu's swordsmanship was superb. This was especially true for the 10 core disciples who had followed Chu Mu. They had personally witnessed their sect master's terrifying swordsmanship. They were extremely moved by the opportunity to learn swordsmanship from Chu Mu, even if it was only for a short month. They felt that all the other rewards couldn't compare to this. In the true sword sect, the sword was everything. With this motivation, they fought even harder and even more brilliantly. After 5 days and 5 nights of fighting, the sect grand competition finally came to an end. The top 3 official disciples, top 3 elite disciples, and top 3 core disciples had obtained the qualifications to learn swordsmanship from Chu Mu for a month. This made everyone envious. Once they finished receiving his guidance, they would be even more envious. After the competition ended, the 9 disciples left with Chu Mu. After watching their competition, Chu Mu was very clear about their swordsmanship attainments and styles. It was effortless for him to give them pointers. One had to know that Chu Mu's swordsmanship had already reached the pinnacle of one with the sword. As for the 9 disciples, the official disciples had barely touched the boundary of one with the sword. The elite disciples were at the beginning of one with the sword, and the core disciples had barely touched the boundary of one with the sword. The boundary of swordsmanship was only a part of the sword Tao. The essence of swordsmanship, sword energy, and so on were also necessary to compose the sword Tao. Chu Mu's few words of guidance were clearly layered and immediately caused the 9 disciples to feel as if they had suddenly seen the light. It was as if the questions that had plagued them for many years had suddenly been solved. Spiritual thoughts poured into their bodies like clear spring water flowing through their bodies. This kind of beauty was indescribable with words. "All right, go and absorb it," said Chu Mu. Although it was a month, Chu Mu couldn't give them pointers every day. Even if he was willing, he had to consider whether they could absorb it. The merit of 1 pointers was enough for them to digest for several days. After entering the secret cultivation room, Chu Mu fell into deep thought again. It was easy to give pointers to the 9 disciples, but it was extremely difficult to think about his own problem. There were many obstacles. Over and over again, cultivating, practicing swordsmanship, comprehending, thinking, and giving pointers. Very soon, a month passed. The 9 disciples had their own gains. What was certain was that each of their swordsmanship had made great progress. The 3 core disciples, who had barely reached the beginning of one with the sword, had completely stabilized at the beginning of one with the sword. The 3 elite disciples had stabilized at the beginning of one with the sword. As for the 3 official disciples, they had barely reached the beginning of one with the sword. The improvement in a month was equivalent to several years of hard work. It was like a miracle. After a month, Chu Mu's swordsmanship had not only been consolidated, but it had also truly reached the peak of one with the sword. There was no room for improvement unless he broke through the current realm. However, Chu Mu didn't know what the next realm was. If he didn't know, he wouldn't be able to successfully break through because there was no goal. In his distress, Chu Mu once again entered the interior of the sword sect spiritual seal. He felt that only Bai Ling could bring him a breakthrough, so he had to look for Bai Ling. Perhaps it was because Bai Ling knew what Chu Mu was thinking, but she was sitting in the pavilion with a leisurely look. "Senior." Chu Mu walked over and greeted her respectfully. "Sit," Bai Ling said slowly. Chu Mu sat down and wanted to ask, but when he saw Bai Ling's expression, he felt a little restrained and didn't know how to ask. Every time Chu Mu sat in front of Bai Ling, he felt as if he had become a junior. This feeling was something that he didn't even feel when facing a saint-level expert. This was an absolute difference in realm, and also a difference in bearing. "Not bad. You have reached the peak of one with the sword. You can break through now." Bai Ling glanced at Chu Mu. Her calm and clear eyes seemed to be able to see through everything and see through all of Chu Mu's secrets. Chu Mu didn't feel uncomfortable at all. When he heard Bai Ling's words, his heart trembled. Wasn't this what he was pursuing? Although the realm of swordsmanship was a part of the way of the sword, it was an extremely important and indispensable part. He looked at Bai Ling expectantly, waiting for her to continue. However, Bai Ling seemed to want to whet Chu Mu's appetite. She paused and didn't speak. "Senior, I have been thinking hard, but I keep feeling that I'm missing something. However, I can't understand it. Please enlighten me." After taking a deep breath, Chu-mu said solemnly, "The realm of swordsmanship is one with the sword. However, this is only the beginning." When Bai Ling heard this, she smiled faintly and said slowly, "Man and sword as one. The sword is like an extension of the body and the arm. Only then can one wield and control the sword with ease. However, this is only on the surface level and has not gone deeper." As she spoke, Bai Ling's finger pointed at her heart. Hearing Bai Ling's words and seeing the movement of Bai Ling's finger, Chu-mu's pupils instantly shrank. A sharp light shot out like a sword. His spiritual world shook. This was a spiritual will storm created by his thoughts. It raged through his spiritual world. In an instant, countless comprehensions surged from the depths of his soul. It was like an instinct that was branded in the depths of his soul. Man and sword as one. The sword is an extension of the man, an extension of the arm, yet it only stays on the surface level. Chu-mu muttered almost unconsciously. Countless comprehensions intersected and surged forth. It was a bit messy and had to be sorted out. Scene after scene of him practicing swordsmanship appeared one after another, and the speed was extremely fast, flashing by in the blink of an eye. If I want to improve, I have to improve. I don't stick to the surface level. I have to go deeper. Heart, he muttered subconsciously and pointed at his heart. It was as if there was some secret hidden there. A trace of confusion appeared in Chu-mu's eyes again. Bai Ling didn't say anything else. She only faintly smiled as she looked at Chu-mu. She was somewhat expectant as to whether this young generation would be able to successfully comprehend and break through under her guidance. Previously, there were a few people who had passed the fourth stage. They had all received her guidance. However, no one could break through, so they were not qualified to obtain the secret of the Sword Sect Spirit Seal. Chu-mu, whether it was age, talent, comprehension, or swordsmanship, was much better than the previous dozens of people. It could be said that he was the most promising person to comprehend and break through. Heart. Sword. As she murmured, the scenes became orderly. The storm of thoughts also calmed down. Her spiritual world seemed to be returning to calmness. A feeling of vastness appeared in his heart. Around Chu-mu, traces of sharpness appeared out of thin air. It was invisible, colorless, and silent. Heart. Sword. Heart. Sword, she repeated it again and again. The bright light shone brightly. There is a sword in my heart. In an instant, Bai Ling's eyes shone brightly. Chapter 1350. Sword in the Heart. The dignified Huang Zheng's voice sounded in his mind. In that instant Chu-mu understood. The next realm after becoming one with the sword. Sword in the heart. Although the realm of becoming one with the sword sounded profound, in the eyes of a true sword expert, it was merely the beginning, stopping at the surface level. It could also be said that it was the peak of the surface level. Sword in the heart, on the other hand, was a higher realm of sword skills, a sublimation from the outside to the inside. The complete name of the realm of sword in the heart was sword in the heart, no sword in the hand. In other words, as long as there was a sword in the heart, even if there was no sword in the hand, one could still release the terrifying power of the sword. Since ancient times, how many sword experts had been stuck at the realm of sword in the world, unable to break through in their lifetime? One external, one internal, the difference between the two realms was obvious. Chu-mu was surrounded by countless rays of sword qi, sharp and sharp, cutting through the space around him as if it was about to be torn apart. In the next moment, these sharp rays of sword qi pierced into Chu-mu's body, entering through every pore on his body. Inside his spiritual world, the two tyrannical top high god rank sword intents also released a shocking sharpness. Powerful fluctuations of will pierced through Huang Xiaolong's body. The top high god rank imperishable sword intent merged with the top high god rank ordinary sword intent. In that instant, there seemed to be signs of surpassing the peak high god rank sword intent. With a new sword intent as the commander, it controlled all the power. The countless sharp sword auras that entered Chu Mu's body seemed to have been summoned and unified. They all surged towards his heart and gathered there. A sword shadow condensed in Huang Xiaolong's heart. As the sharp rays of sword qi entered his heart, the sword shadow seemed to be hammered and tempered 1,000 times, becoming more and more solid. In the end, the supreme sword intent pierced through time and space, descending on the materialized sword shadow, merging with it. A bright light flashed, and the sharp rays of sword qi converged. The materialized sword shadow seemed to have turned into a real sword, emitting a metallic luster. The silver sword in Huang Xiaolong's heart was cold and sharp, shining in all directions. From inside to outside, Chu Mu's body exuded a shocking sharpness, as if he was a divine sword unsheathed, exuding its sharpness without restraint. There was a sword in his heart. Chu Mu came to his senses. Suddenly, his understanding of swordsmanship leaped to a whole new level. Everything that he didn't understand in the past was now clear to him. It was a wonderful feeling to be able to see the blue sky after clearing the clouds. Looking around, he realized that the environment gave him a different feeling. It was as if it had been cleansed and became clearer. Looking at Bai Ling, she was still mysterious and unfathomable, but there seemed to be a layer missing, making her more real. "You really didn't disappoint me." Bai Ling smiled. "Senior, please advise me," Chu Mu said respectfully to Bai Ling, full of fighting spirit. Now that he had made a breakthrough in his swordsmanship, his attainments in swordsmanship had increased by leaps and bounds. Chu Mu felt that with his current level, even if he hadn't completely consolidated it, he was much stronger than before. He could definitely fight Bai Ling. Even if he wasn't a match for her, he wouldn't lose so easily. Bai Ling smiled and said, "Then be careful, I'm going to attack." As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Mu saw Bai Ling wave her hand. A snow-white sword light streaked across the sky. The sword light wasn't sharp at all. Instead, it had a kind of smoothness to it, as if it was a whole. There was no beginning or end, and there were no flaws. The speed of the sword light didn't seem to be fast at all. However, Chu Mu didn't know why, but he couldn't react. He could only watch as the sword light leisurely streaked across the sky, crossing a distance of a few meters and piercing towards his forehead. A heavy feeling of powerlessness spread throughout his body. This made Chu Mu deeply understand what it meant to have the will but not the strength. Now, his vision and his six senses could all capture this sword light. However, his body seemed to have stiffened and separated from his consciousness. He couldn't control it and couldn't react in time. One sword, instant kill. After leaving the sword sect spiritual mark, Chu Mu couldn't be more depressed in the secret cultivation room. His sword technique had broken through to a whole new level, but he still lost. Losing was within his expectations, but just like before, he was instantly killed by a sword. This kind of result was too unexpected. Chu Mu couldn't accept it for a while. Discouraged, this was the portrayal of Chu Mu's current state. The difference was just too great. Fortunately, his will had always been firm and his sword intent was extraordinary. However, it still took him some time to eliminate these negative emotions. Otherwise, if this continued for a long time, it would only affect his mind. There's a huge difference between having a sword in the heart and becoming one with the sword. It's like the difference between the Nirvana realm and the Eternal realm. However, it's extremely difficult to raise the level of sword technique. In a short period of time, I can't raise the level of having a sword in the heart. Defeating Bai Ling is an extravagant hope, Chu Mu thought to himself. Bai Ling was the examiner of the 5th test, and perhaps the last test. According to his previous experience, defeating Bai Ling was the only way to pass the test and unlock the secret of the sword sect spiritual mark. In addition to being dispirited, Chu Mu was also a little excited. The difficulty of the test meant that the secret of the sword sect spiritual mark was extremely shocking. At that time, after defeating Bai Ling and unlocking the secret of the sword sect's spiritual mark, there might be a huge harvest. Thinking of this, Chu Mu was even more motivated. The current plan was to first consolidate the state of having a sword in the heart. Now that he had just broken through, his thoughts and consciousness had been greatly improved. There was a slight feeling of being separated from his body. He had to refine it and achieve synchronization. Only then would the awkward situation of being unable to react in time like before occur. The slightest delay was fatal in a battle between powerhouses. The major breakthrough in the level of sword technique was extremely important to Chu Mu. It allowed his perception, understanding and mastery of the sword to rise to a whole new level. This kind of improvement was extremely shocking. With the sword in his hand, there was an indescribable feeling. It was as if the sword grew from his heart. It was even more exquisite than the extension of his arm. Chu Mu released his hand, but the sword did not fall. Instead, it floated in front of him. He did not use sword origin, nor did he use his spiritual sense. He only relied on the feeling in his heart. The sword floated in the air just like that. With a thought, the sword slowly revolved around Chu Mu. It was somewhat stiff and rough. However, before this, Chu Mu could not do this. Although this method did not have much power, it displayed Chu Mu's absolute control of the sword. Holding the sword in his hand again, Xiao Qin began to practice his sword technique. It was still a basic sword technique, but when he practiced it now, the feeling was completely different. It was a deeper level, straight to the essence. Every strike seemed ordinary, but it contained shocking power. Just a simple stab seemed to be able to pierce through the void. Chu Mu immersed himself in it, forgetting everything as he continuously practiced the sword. The process of practicing the sword was also the process of familiarizing himself with the new level. It allowed his body and consciousness to synchronize and coordinate again. This time, the practice lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Only then did Chu Mu stop. His thoughts were flowing like a spring. His understanding of the sword technique seemed to have improved again. The sharpness on his body was even stronger. Now, Chu Mu's level of sword technique could be said to be at the entry level of having a sword in his heart. He had not completely consolidated it yet. This level had already surpassed the vast majority of saint experts. Even some high-level sword saints might not be able to match Chu Mu in terms of sword technique. At this point, Chu Mu had a deeper understanding. He originally thought that he had comprehended the heart of the sword, but now he understood that the heart of the sword was only on the surface level. It was just an illusory saying. Now, with a sword in his heart, it was the heart of the sword, the true heart of the sword. After practicing the sword for 3 days and 3 nights, Chu Mu did not leave the secret cultivation room. Instead, he meditated on other sword technique. For example, the various sword techniques that he had practiced before, such as fierce wind fast sword, autumn water long sky, and so on, had not been used for a long time. Now that he had meditated on them, they had completely surpassed their original level and reached an amazing level. Chu Mu meditated on the ancient archaic sword technique again. He was pleasantly surprised to find that he had easily grasped the essence of the ancient archaic sword technique. It did not take long for him to completely understand the ancient archaic sword technique and see the pros and cons of it. In just 3 days, Chu Mu had modified the drawbacks of the ancient archaic sword technique and improved it. Unknowingly, the new ancient archaic sword technique had become stronger and reached the high level of the heaven level. Such a change made Chu Mu extremely excited. The realm of having a sword in the heart was indeed very terrifying. Perhaps I can create my own sword technique. An idea suddenly jumped out of his mind like a seed, taking root and growing out of control. Chu Mu immediately thought about the feasibility of creating his own sword technique. It was necessary to create his own sword technique. However, his current accumulation was far from enough. Indeed, with Chu Mu's current attainments and realm, It was not difficult to create one or even several sword techniques. However, the sword techniques that he created would not be the perfect sword technique in his mind. He needed more comprehension, more experience, and more knowledge to be able to create the perfect sword technique in his mind. Only then would he be able to create the most suitable sword technique for himself. To achieve that step, it would take a lot of time and energy. However, Chu Mu was willing to pay for it because he felt that if he could succeed, then his strength would skyrocket to a point that would surprise even himself. No one would dislike more powerful strength without any sequelae. That was the lifelong pursuit of all cultivators. Although he could not create the perfect sword technique in his mind now, it did not prevent Chu Mu from creating a few sword techniques to play with. He could also treat it as practice and prepare to create the perfect sword technique in the future. Immediately, Chu Mu consciously created the sword techniques according to the various sword techniques that he had cultivated and seen, as well as the sword techniques stored in the real sword sect. Under the control of sword intent and the support of the realm of the sword in the heart, he consciously created them. He took the essence and removed the dross, coordinated and integrated it, and tried it himself. Gradually, he perfected it. From beginning to end, Chu Mu had spent a total of half a month to create 4 sword techniques. Moreover, he had perfected them to the greatest extent possible, reaching the limits of what he could currently achieve. Of course, since Chu Mu was able to upgrade the ancient archaic sword technique from the middle level of the heaven level to the high level of the heaven level, the 4 sword techniques that he created were flawless in the eyes of most sword saints. They could be called perfect. Chapter 1351. Among the 4 sword techniques, the first one was called Wind and Thunder Break. It carried the power of wind and thunder. It was swift, fierce, and violent. It was a peak-tier yellow class sword technique. Its power was at the peak of the yellow class. After mastering its essence, its power would not be inferior to a low-tier black class sword technique. The second sword art was called the Long River Sword Art. Its attack was like the water of a long river, continuous and inexhaustible. It was a powerful sword art that had reached the peak of the profound class. After mastering it, it could be comparable to a low-tier earth-class sword art, or even slightly better. The third sword technique was called the Iron Slashing Sword Technique. It was extremely sharp and indestructible. It was incomparably sharp and terrifying. It was a sword technique that had reached the peak of the earth grade. In a sense, its power was not inferior to an ordinary heaven-grade low-tier sword technique. Strictly speaking, these 3 sword techniques were not difficult for Chu Mu to create. He only used 5 or 6 days to create them. The rest of the time, other than perfecting them, was mainly used to create and perfect the 4th sword technique. Chu Mu named the 4th sword technique Zhenxian sword technique. It was a sword technique that Chu Mu spent a lot of effort on. This sword technique was different from the other 3. It was not limited to fusing with the power of heaven and earth. In short, anyone could cultivate this sword technique and fuse with the power of heaven and earth, allowing the sword technique to have a different performance. To Chu Mu, these sword techniques were too low level. Even the high-tier heaven-class ancient sword technique was ordinary to Chu Mu. It seemed that even a peak-tier heaven-class sword technique would not shock Chu Mu. He even had a feeling that such a sword technique was not a true sword technique. However, he was not sure what it was. After coming out of seclusion, he summoned Elder Yun Feng and Elder Yun He. Guest Elder Yang Zhen was also called over. Study these 4 sword techniques and put them in the teaching peak for the disciples to cultivate. Chu Mu had already recorded the 4 sword techniques and handed them to everyone. Elder Yun Feng took the scroll and looked at it carefully. It was the first sword technique, yellow class, top tier. With his level of attainment, he was able to understand it very quickly. It was because of this that he could not help but shout out, "What an exquisite sword technique! It can be said to be perfect." Elder Yun Feng could not help but exclaim. Even Yang Zhen, a saint-level expert, couldn't see any flaws in it. It was so perfect that it was integrated into a whole. Sect Master, each of these 4 sword techniques is stronger than the last. They're much stronger than the various sword techniques collected by our true sword sect. Elder Yun he exclaimed. Yes. In the future, these 4 sword techniques will be the main sword techniques of the true sword sect, Chumu said. Speaking of which, it wasn't easy for the true sword sect either. In the entire sect, there was only one heaven-level sword technique, and it was only at the low-tier heaven level. It couldn't be compared to the true profound sword technique. That's great. With these 4 sword techniques, I believe that after the disciples cultivate them, their strength will increase by a lot. Yunfeng said happily. After Yang Zhen saw it, he was very tempted. He had the idea of focusing on sword technique. This wasn't impossible. He cultivated both spells and sword technique. Among the saint-level experts, he was relatively mediocre. If he focused on sword techniques, it might have a miraculous effect. However, this wasn't a small matter. He had to think about it carefully. After handing the sword techniques to the elders to study, Chu Mu left them alone. After patrolling around the true sword sect, there was nothing much to do. After taking a break, he entered the secret cultivation room again. This time, Chu Mu began to cultivate the 5 elements secret art. He was wondering if the sword in the heart realm would be helpful to the secret art. As soon as he tried, Chu Mu was pleasantly surprised. As expected, the sword in the heart realm would be helpful to the cultivation of the secret arts. However, the effect wasn't as obvious as the sword technique. The secret arts were carried by the sword. Part of the sword techniques was quickly grasped, while the other part was actually the deeper application of the power of heaven and earth. Chu Mu used the sword techniques to carry it, and then he deepened his understanding quickly. Chu Mu had already cultivated the 5 elements secret arts to the small success realm. Now that his understanding had deepened rapidly, he was able to perform them without any delay. He changed his focus temporarily and focused on the 5 elements secret art. He planned to solve the secret of the 5 spirits' secret pagoda first. As for the improvement of the sword techniques, it wasn't something that could be done overnight. It had to be calculated in years. In the short term, at least within the next 10 years, Chu Mu felt that there was no hope of defeating Bai Ling. Since that was the case, he couldn't put his time into the cultivation of the sword techniques and neglect other things. If he didn't have anything to worry about, it wasn't impossible. However, the current situation didn't allow it. Cultivating the 5 elements secret arts was not only to solve the final secret of the 5 spirits' secret pagoda, but also to improve his own strength. For a whole month, Chu Mu cultivated tirelessly. Finally, he cultivated the 5 elements secret arts to the same level as Deshang. After informing the elders that he was going to cultivate in seclusion for a while, Chu Mu activated the 5 spirits order and entered the 5 spirits secret pagoda for the 3rd time. On the 2nd floor of the 5 spirits secret pagoda, Chu Mu chose to challenge it without hesitation. 5 rays of light appeared from all directions and gathered together. As they rotated, they finally gathered together and a life was born. The 5 rays of light converged and a strange-looking life appeared in front of Chu Mu. It looked like a human but had 4 arms. Its body was brown and the 4 arms were gold, green, blue, and red respectively. They emitted different auras. The 5 elements spiritual beast king. Once Chu Mu's opponent chose to challenge him, there was no way out. If the opponent didn't die, then Chu Mu would die. It was a powerful opponent. Just from the aura, Chu Mu knew that the 5 elements spirit beast king's cultivation was comparable to the 7th sky of Nirvana realm. However, it was definitely more powerful than an ordinary 7th sky of Nirvana realm. The most important thing was that the other heavens and earth were restrained here. Only the 5 elements' rule power could be used. The sky beheading sword appeared in his hand. They were connected by blood. The imperishable sword also appeared in his left hand. This was a battle of life and death. There was no room for carelessness. Without saying anything, Chu Mu attacked directly. The gold force field was released. The 5 elements' sharp gold sword slashed out. The golden rays of light pierced through the air. It was extremely sharp. Then, the gold force field changed to the water force field. Gold gave birth to water. The 5 elements' flowing water sword slashed out. The wood force field, water force field. However, before the 5 elements' green wood sword could be used, the 5 elements' spirit beast king counterattacked. It shattered 2 of Chu Mu's sword light and a terrifying power blasted out. The 5-colored profound light was like a sharp cone spiral. It was extremely terrifying. The 2 swords slashed out and then dodged. The state of having a sword in his heart allowed Chu Mu to do whatever he wanted during the battle. His mind was sharp and his reaction was fast. Although the 5 elements Spirit Beast King's attack was powerful enough to kill any 7th sky of Nirvana Realm cultivator, it could not hit Chu Mu. Chu Mu seemed to be at ease. If it was before, he would definitely not be able to do this. The feeling of controlling the sword with his heart and becoming one with the sword was completely different. It was effortless. The powerful strength made Chu Mu's mentality change quietly. The 5 elements Spirit Beast King became his sword test stone to test his strength. It had to be said that the 5 elements Spirit Beast King was very powerful. The power of each of its attacks was very shocking. Once hit, death was inevitable. The 5 elements Spirit Beast King's mastery and application of the power of the 5 elements was above Chu Mu. Chu Mu fought with the 5 elements Spirit Beast King. In addition to testing his current strength, he could also learn the application of the power of the 5 elements from the 5 elements Spirit Beast King. He could further improve his mastery and application of the power of the 5 element. In this way, the power of the 5 elements secret art and the 5 elements force field would also be improved. The 5 elemental Spirit Beast King possessed simple intelligence. It attacked many times, but it was unable to hit Chu Mu. Chu Mu's counterattack had even injured it. Full of anger, the 5 elemental Spirit Beast King let out a berserk roar. Its astonishing aura soared into the sky and bombarded the surroundings. Its body seemed to have expanded by one size and became berserk. Not only could the 5 elements Spirit Beast King attack from afar, it could also fight in close range. Its power was very terrifying. When it combined the power of the 5 elements into one, its power was very terrifying. Not to mention the 7th sky of the Nirvana Realm, even a 9th sky of the Nirvana Realm would most likely die if hit. Of course, this did not mean that Chu Mu could fight against a 9th sky of the Nirvana Realm cultivator. After all, cultivators were different from the 5 elements Spirit Beast King. Dodging and counterattacking again and again, Chu Mu's application of the 5 elements secret art was getting deeper and deeper. He was getting more and more free to switch between them. After the Sword Realm reached the Sword in the Heart Realm, learning and comprehending things related to the sword became faster. After about an hour, Chu Mu learned a more advanced application of the power of the 5 elements from the 5 elements Spirit Beast King. Metal Force Field, 5 elements Sharp Metal Sword, Water Force Field, 5 elements Flowing Water Sword, Wood Force Field, 5 elements Greenwood Sword, Fire Force Field, 5 elements Raging Fire Sword, Earth Force Field, and 5 elements Thick Earth Sword. As the 2 swords alternated, the 5 elements force field quickly changed and the 5 secret arts were used in turn. The power of the 5 elements Thick Earth Sword was more than twice the original power. The brown sword light crossed the sky and slashed down. It was incomparably heavy, as if it was condensed into a mountain, crushing everything. The 5 elements Spirit Beast King could not dodge and was hit directly. With a boom, the 5 elements secret pagoda seemed to be shaking. The continuous bombardment of the 5 secret arts caused damage to the 5 elements Spirit Beast King again and again. Especially the last 5 elements Thick Earth Sword, its power was unbelievably tyrannical. When it slashed down, the 5 elements Spirit Beast King's body suddenly trembled and cracks appeared on its body. Since he had already verified his current strength, Chu Mu did not hold back anymore. He raised the sky beheading sword. The golden light surged and the blue light flowed. Gold and blue coexisted, intertwining and intertwining, emitting an incomparably sharp and continuous aura. The sword slashed out. The golden blue sword light pierced through the sky like an endless stream. It slashed the body of the 5 elements Spirit Beast King. The body of the 5 elements Spirit Beast King had already begun to crack. It could no longer withstand the attack of the sword. The 5 elements Spirit Beast King was dead. Chapter 1352. With an earth-shattering roar, the 5 elements Spirit Beast King disintegrated and died under Chu Mu's sword. It turned back into a ray of 5-colored light and dissipated on the second level of the 5 Spirits Pagoda. Immediately, a 5-colored vortex appeared above where the 5 elements Spirit Beast King disappeared. It led to the third level. Chu Mu was a little excited, but he quickly calmed down. In a flash, he appeared at the 5-colored vortex and disappeared into it. The power of the 5 elements became more intense. It made the power of the 5 elements rule in Chu Mu's spiritual world very active. The space on the third level of the 5 Spirits Pagoda was smaller than the second level. The first thing Chu Mu did was look at his surroundings. There was nothing in the 5 corners. This was different from the first and second levels. The emptiness on the third level was out of Chu Mu's expectation. The 5 elemental Spirit Beast King's strength was tyrannical. If his sword technique hadn't broken through to the level of having a sword in his heart, even if Chu Mu had trained his 5 elemental secret arts to great completion, it would still be difficult for him to defeat it. Under such difficult conditions, entering the third level and finding nothing, the disparity caused Chu Mu's brows to slightly crease. Just as Chu Mu was surprised, waves of power appeared. It was the power of the 5 elements. It was very strong. Gold, green, blue, red, and brown. The 5 divine lights seemed to come from the void. They gathered in the center of the third level. The waves became more and more intense. Chu Mu's face turned serious. He raised his vigilance to the extreme. Under the power of the 5 elements, a shadow gradually condensed and became clear. Chu Mu was stunned. The shadow's appearance was very similar to a human. It was wearing a dark blue robe, which showed off its slender figure. There were golden, green, red, and brown patterns on the dark blue robe. Chu Mu was sure that this person was not a human. Because his ears were longer than a human's, and his pupils were not black like a human's. They were a deep blue. Although it was just a shadow, it gave Chu Mu a terrible pressure. He was almost suffocating. As if facing a great enemy, Chu Mu took out the sky beheading sword and the imperishable sword. Junior of the human race, there's no need to be nervous. I bear you no ill will. The slender figure and deep blue eyes fell on Chu Mu's face. Suddenly, Chu Mu had a strange feeling, as if he was looking at a deep and endless ocean. I am the 5 Spirits Sword Saint of the 5 Spirits clan. Junior of the human race, it is your fortune to be able to enter the 5 Spirits mystery realm. The 5 Spirits Sword Saint slowly said, the inheritances on the first and second levels of the 5 Spirits Pagoda are all preliminary inheritances. Now I will give you the real inheritance. As he spoke, the 5 Spirit Sword Saint extended a finger and a 5-colored ray of light carrying a sliver of sharpness shot out. It was unavoidable and shot into Chu Mu's forehead, straight into his mental world and into the depths of his mind. Pieces of information appeared at an extremely fast speed, making Chu Mu feel overwhelmed. After a while, the 5 elemental sword saint retracted his finger. His figure became very faint, as if he would disappear with a gust of wind. I have a request. If you meet the 5 Spirits clan one day, I hope you can pass down the 5 Spirits mystery technique to them. If the 5 Spirits clan is in trouble, and you have the ability, I hope you can help. This is my request. The 5 elemental sword saint, who was about to disappear, said to Chu Mu. Okay. Chu Mu thought for a moment and agreed. The 5 elemental sword saint was from the 5 spirits clan. It was natural for him to pass down the 5 spirits mystery technique to the 5 spirits clan. If the 5 spirits clan was in trouble, Chu Mu would help. This was based on the fact that he had the corresponding ability. In other words, if the danger was too great and exceeded Chu Mu's ability, Chu Mu could ignore it. I hope you can do it. The 5 elemental sword saint looked deeply at Chu Mu and said, as a reward, this deep blue god pearl is yours. Perhaps one day you will obtain all of the deep blue god pearls and enter the center of the world. As he said this, the 5 elemental sword saint's figure disappeared. A deep blue bead floated in the air, emitting a weak light. This light was also deep blue and seemed incomparably deep. It was incomparably enchanting. Looking at it, one's soul would be sucked in, unable to extricate itself. With a powerful will, Chu Mu didn't lose himself in it. He reached out and the deep blue god pearl flew into his hand as he carefully examined it. The deep blue god pearl was a deep blue color. It was as boundless as the sea and was about the size of an egg. Chu Mu carefully examined it and discovered that there were 3 golden runes within the deep blue god pearl. These runes looked very strange, as if they contained a mysterious and unfathomable strength. The 3 mysterious golden runes seemed to be carved on the surface of the deep blue god pearl, but they also seemed to be on the inside. It was very strange. Chu Mu fiddled with the deep blue god pearl for a while before storing it in his pocket space. That was the safest option. Only now did he know that the real name of the 18 god pearls was the deep blue god pearl. Deep blue world, deep blue god pearl. The 5 elemental sword saint's last words made Chu Mu extremely excited. Chu Mu's mission was to find the world spirit. The world spirit was most likely located in the center of the world. However, it was hard to say where the center of the world was. It might be in the center of the deep blue world, but the world was vast and he might not be able to find it. After learning about the 18 god pearls and the so-called secret of the world, Chu Mu wondered if it had something to do with the world spirit. Now, the 5 elemental sword saint's words made Chu Mu even more certain that the 18 god pearls were indeed related to the world spirit. After learning this, Chu Mu was in a good mood. He quickly left the 5 elemental pagoda and appeared outside. It was still as barren as before. After he left the 5 elemental pagoda, the 5 elemental order also disappeared. He took out the colossal sword flying ship and boarded it. He activated its maximum speed and flew towards the ancient beast mountain. Inside the colossal sword, Chu Mu immersed himself in reading the 5 elemental sword saint's final inheritance, the so-called 5 elemental mystic canon. As he gradually organized it, Chu Mu knew that there were a total of 5 cultivation techniques recorded in the 5 elemental mystic canon. They cultivated the elemental energy of the 5 elements respectively. It seemed that one could cultivate multiple cultivation techniques at the same time. For example, the 5 elemental sword saint cultivated 5 cultivation techniques at the same time. Chu Mu cultivated the divine wilderness sword art. It was not weaker than cultivating 5 elemental cultivation techniques at the same time. Naturally, he would not switch cultivation techniques as that would be troublesome. Other than the 5 techniques, there were the 5 elemental techniques and 5 force fields that Chu Mu had cultivated. Other than that, there were the various experiences and comprehensions of the 5 spirit sword saints' sword techniques, as well as the various experiences and comprehensions of the techniques he had cultivated. Lastly, there was an absolute art. It was a high-level absolute art called the 5 elemental revolving sword. In the Sky-Bearing Academy, Chu Mu had read many books and understood that there were humans, sea race and heavenly race in the deep blue world. As for the 5 elemental tribes, he only knew about them recently. It seemed that the deep blue world was much richer than what he had previously understood. However, Chu Mu would not purposely inquire about the 5 elemental tribes. If he was fated to meet them, he would naturally meet them. At that time, he would fulfill his promise to the 5 elemental sword saint. What made Chu Mu curious was that since the 5 elemental sword saint was a sword saint, he must have grasped sword force. Human sword saints could not cultivate both spells and sword techniques at the same time because that would not be pure enough. The 5 elemental sword saint was rather special. Not only did he grasp sword force, he also cultivated spells. Was he special, or did the 5 elemental tribes all have this ability? After thinking about it, the latter was more likely. It seemed that the 5 elemental tribes were not ordinary. Even if they met in the future, he would not be able to help much. This would save him a lot of trouble. The speed of the giant sword ship was very fast, but it would take some time to return to the ancient beast mountain. During this time, Chu Mu used all his strength to absorb the sword experience left behind by the 5 elemental sword saint. As a sword saint, and a high-level one at that, the 5 elemental sword saint had profound attainments in sword technique. His experience in sword techniques was incomparably rich, far above that of Chu Mu. After all, the 5 elemental sword saint had lived for many times longer than Chu Mu. The number of battles he had fought was also many times more than Chu Mu. All kinds of experiences, all kinds of cultivation, and all kinds of other things far surpassed Chu Mu. He was a senior figure. Therefore, the sword experience left behind by the 5 elemental sword saint was very useful to Chu Mu. After completely absorbing it, Chu Mu felt that his level of sword techniques would increase significantly. Perhaps defeating Bai Ling and unlocking the secret of the sword sect's spiritual seal would shorten the time needed again. As for the 5 elemental revolving sword technique, Chu Mu would also cultivate it, but not now. Sword techniques were the foundation. Once he improved, everything related to sword techniques would become easier to cultivate. The giant sword ship flew for close to 20 days. Fortunately, Chu Mu had many origin pills in reserve, which were enough to support the giant sword ship's flight. Only then did they arrive at the ancient beast mountain. After close to 20 days of comprehension, Chu Mu had absorbed part of the 5 elemental sword saint's experience. His horizons were broadened, and his attainments in sword techniques had increased. He had completely consolidated the level of heart with sword. Next, he would do his best to improve. When Chu Mu returned, he did not disturb anyone. First, he patrolled around the true sword sect. During the time he was away, the true sword sect was fine. Nothing had happened. After patrolling, Chu Mu summoned the 2 elders, Yun Feng and Yun He. Then, he entered the cultivation room again and focused on absorbing the 5 elemental sword saint's experience. The 5 elemental sword saint had practiced the sword for thousands of years. His understanding of the sword and sword techniques had its own unique point. His knowledge and experience had also enriched his sword techniques and brought him a kind of life trajectory. Not all of these things were suitable for Chu Mu. It could even be said that most of them were not suitable for him. If Chu Mu wanted to absorb them, he had to remove the parts that were not suitable for him and absorb the parts that were suitable for him. Only then would he be able to absorb them. In this situation, cultivation was the biggest limiting factor for Chu Mu's strength. Unfortunately, his cultivation increased very slowly. Unless he could obtain a large number of treasures and open up the spiritual pool, he would be able to quickly improve. Even though the speed of improvement was slow, Chu Mu still did not give up. He persisted in cultivating every day. It had already become a habit. Cultivate, practice the sword, absorb the experience, and then cultivate the 5 elemental revolving sword technique. The 5 elemental revolving sword technique did not have much to do with the 5 elemental revolving sword technique. Therefore, it was not easy to cultivate it. However, in the end, it was based on the sword technique. With the heart with sword, Chu Mu still comprehended it quickly. Chapter 1353. The disciples of the true sword sect had to cultivate every day, and some of them had to be on duty. They had to guard the mines or search for resources in the ancient Beast Mountain. The 4 sword techniques that Chu Mu had created had become the legacy sword techniques of the true sword sect. Any disciple with enough contribution points could exchange for them. The threshold for exchange was not high. As long as the disciples were sincere in doing missions to earn contribution points, they could exchange for the corresponding sword technique. For example, the official disciples could exchange for the Wind and Thunder Break sword technique, the elite disciples could exchange for the Long River sword technique, and the core disciples could exchange for the Iron Slash sword technique. As for the Heaven-class low-tier true mystery sword technique, only the 2 elders, Yun Feng and Yun He, were practicing it. I still need 3,000 contribution points to exchange for the true mystery sword technique. The number 1 core disciple clenched his fist. 3,000 contribution points was a lot for the official disciples, but it was not much for the core disciples. The sect master's private training room could be considered the best training room in the entire sect. With the sky/sword in his hand, the 5-colored light flowed and intertwined. A powerful aura was released, and the power of the 5 elements fluctuated violently. He slashed out with his sword. The 5-colored sword light turned into a huge wheel made of 5 colors. It spun at a high speed and slashed at the sword testing stone. The 5-colored wheel continued to cut the sword testing stone. After a crack was cut on the hard sword testing stone, the power of the 5-colored wheel was used up and disappeared. Only the power of a saint could destroy the sword testing stone. Chu Mu's 5 elements rotating sword could cut a crack on the stone, which showed the power of this high-tier technique. As a high-tier technique, the power of the 5 elements rotating sword was not inferior to the Void Nirvana sword. With a low roar, Chu Mu swung his sword again. The 5-colored light appeared again. As he swung his sword, a 5-colored light wheel appeared around him, protecting him. The 5 elements revolving sword was an ultimate technique that the 5 spirits sword saint had created himself. It was also an ultimate technique that he was extremely proud of. It had 2 applications. The first application was to attack the target with a single slash. The second application was to defend oneself. It didn't take long for Chu Mu to cultivate the 5 elements revolving sword technique to the initial success stage and display its astonishing power. Gradually, Chu Mu's cultivation began to adjust. The 5 elements rule force was tempered by the 5 elements sutra, and the space rule force was resonated by the Void Breaker secret manual. There was no need for Chu Mu to worry about it. As for the other world forces, Chu Mu felt somewhat helpless. Wind and thunder, cloud and ice. Among them, cloud and ice were at the lowest level. Chu Mu really wanted to divide himself into 10 parts, and each part could cultivate a different type of cultivation. How nice would that be? That was just a thought. True cultivation was the way to go. His goal was clear, and the choice he made was the power of time. Previously, when he was in Sky-Bearing Academy, he had already finished tempering the power of time and reached the peak of the esoteric realm. He only needed an opportunity to break through. Originally, he planned to leave Sky-Bearing Academy after the esoteric realm had transformed into the time rule force. Unexpectedly, there was an accident and he had to leave early. What happened after that was not within Chu Mu's control. Becoming the sect master of the real sword sect and unraveling the secret of the sword sect's spiritual seal had forced Chu Mu to temporarily put aside his cultivation of the power of time. Only now did he start again. There was no corresponding technique for cultivating the power of time. Hence, it was rather crude and simple. However, the esoteric realm had already reached the peak, and he had no time to care about it for a period of time. However, the breakthrough in the realm of the sword technique had led to the growth of Chu Mu's consciousness. 3 days later, the power of time finally ushered in a transformation. A unique aura spread out from Chu Mu's spiritual world, affecting the space around him. The flow of time became extremely unstable. Fortunately, it only affected Chu Mu's surroundings and couldn't cover the entire secret cultivation room. Otherwise, it would have caused a commotion. The color of the power of time was very mysterious. It seemed to be transparent, but it also seemed to be any color. It was indescribable. The power of time was constantly fluctuating. The aura was released, causing the power of time around him to resonate. Chu Mu's entire body became illusory. In a trance, he seemed to have become old. In another trance, he seemed to have become a child. In the spiritual world, the power of time instantly contracted and expanded. The aura stabilized. The fluctuations around Chu Mu also disappeared. When he opened his eyes, it was as if he had seen through the vicissitudes of life. It was like an illusion that disappeared in an instant. His eyes returned to normal. What a magical time rule! Chu Mu felt it and sighed. The esoteric realm of time had transformed into the time rule. Its power had increased tenfold. Moreover, Chu Mu could vaguely feel the flow of time around him. Time passed day by day. Everyone knew it. However, the intelligent life in it could only accept it. Under the flow of time, they lived their lives. Because they didn't understand it, they could only accept it. They couldn't resist it. Chu Mu was different now. He could feel the flow of time. It was like water washing his body. The feeling was very clear. He even had a feeling that he could control time. However, he couldn't do it now because he didn't have enough power. One day he would be able to accelerate time, reverse time, and so on. This made Chu Mu full of expectations. The power of time had successfully transformed into the time rule. The subsequent refinement would be even more difficult. He wouldn't be able to break through in a short time. He couldn't break through to the beginner level of the sword in the heart in a short time either. He couldn't break through to the mid-stage of the fifth sky of Nirvana realm in a short time either. After thinking about it, Chu Mu had the idea of leaving this place and going to a wider world. Experience, battle, improve, and find other deep blue divine pearls. As soon as this idea popped up, there was an irrepressible intensity. If it was in the past, Chu Mu would certainly leave. However, the situation was different now. As the master of a sect, he had to consider more comprehensively. He had to make arrangements. This was a big mess. While thinking, Chu Mu took out the remnant page again. The eternal sword momentum once again jumped into his eyes. Chu Mu was suddenly stunned. He stared at the content of the remnant page. He couldn't take his eyes off it, as if he had turned into a statue. All kinds of comprehensions quickly emerged in his mind. The sword experience of the five spirits Sword Saint was absorbed by Chu Mu unconsciously at an unimaginable speed. Chu Mu finally understood the eternal sword momentum on the remnant page. If he could understand it, he could understand it. Under the state of the sword in the heart, and with the lifetime sword experience of the five spirits Sword Saint, Chu Mu constantly understood the eternal sword momentum. So that's how it is. After a long time, Chu Mu's gaze moved away. He had already understood most of the eternal sword momentum. This was a sword technique, but it wasn't a sword technique. Simply put, the eternal sword momentum was actually a way to cultivate sword technique. It was a way to use the sword in one's hand. It wasn't an offensive move, nor did it have any defensive ability. However, the eternal sword momentum allowed Chu Mu to see the huge potential contained in it. The way to use the sword. He couldn't help but sigh. The person who created this eternal sword momentum was far superior to him in the realm of sword technique. This was because this eternal sword momentum could only be comprehended after his sword technique realm broke through to the level of the sword in the heart. It could also have an effect on the cultivation of the sword in the heart realm. For a time, Chu Mu forgot about the idea of leaving the true sword sect. He wholeheartedly comprehended the eternal sword momentum. After comprehending for a while, Chu Mu pulled out his sword and started cultivating. His swinging of the sword didn't seem to have any method. It was as if he was a person who had just come into contact with the sword. It was very rough. If a sword expert saw it, they would probably frown. However, as Chu Mu moved, the swinging of the sword became more and more exquisite. Although there was no method or pattern to each of his swings, they were very accurate. The speed, accuracy, and fierceness of the sword technique were displayed to the extreme. Cultivating would make people forget the passage of time. Chu Mu practiced for a while, then stopped to comprehend the eternal sword momentum for a while, then practiced for a while. Unknowingly, his control and application of the sword became more and more at will. Unknowingly, Chu Mu cultivated for a few days. Only then did he remember that he hadn't left the secret cultivation room for a while. He temporarily put down his cultivation and left the secret cultivation room. Elder Yun Feng came to find him. Sect Master, according to the usual practice, it's time to recruit disciples again, Elder Yun Feng reported. Right now, the True Sword sect did indeed have fewer disciples. If a sect wanted to develop, there were two ways. One was to walk the path of elites. That was, every disciple was an elite. They were all true geniuses. However, this method was too difficult. It required enough resources and a strong enough foundation. Otherwise, those true geniuses wouldn't choose this method. Therefore, most sects would use the second method to develop, and that was to recruit disciples. With more disciples, there would naturally be some geniuses. When they matured, it would be extremely beneficial to the sect. Would it cost more resources to recruit disciples? Actually, it didn't. With more disciples, there would be differences in quality. Furthermore, the sect had corresponding rules. The sect's resources weren't that easy to obtain. Many disciples competed, and in the end, only the best would remain. If the True Sword sect wanted to develop, they had to recruit more disciples. At the foot of Ancient Beast Mountain, there were many disciples in name. They were the first choice for True Sword sect's new disciples. In addition, they could also recruit disciples from the surrounding areas. Ancient Beast Mountain's area was vast, not the least bit inferior to Yen Mountain. There were many humans living here, and the True Sword sect was the overlord of this area. If they wanted to recruit disciples, it would attract a lot of attention. Elder Yun Feng, I'll leave the matter of recruiting new disciples to you and Elder Yun He to discuss, said Chu Mu. He immediately became a hands-off shopkeeper. Once you've made a decision, just inform me. Hearing this, Yun Feng helplessly laughed. However, Chu Mu had previously said that he wouldn't participate much in the management of the sect. Yun Feng had already mentally prepared himself. Yes, sect master. Yun Feng said and retreated to find Elder Yun He to discuss the various matters of recruiting new disciples. Chu Mu thought for a moment before temporarily putting this matter aside and continuing to cultivate. Chapter 1354. The sky was blue and cloudless. It was so pure that it was like a huge gem, making people want to touch it. A sword-shaped flying ship that looked like it had been magnified many times quickly swept across the sky and flew forward rapidly. It was too fast, and the sonic booms were like surging waves. A gully seemed to have been plowed open in the sky, and the air in the gully seemed to be clearer than the surroundings. This speed was not the full speed of the great sword. It was only about 70%. It did not consume much energy, so Chu Mu could still support it. This time, Chu Mu really left the True Sword sect. The True Sword sect had already finished recruiting new disciples. Among the many nominal disciples, more than 200 had become official disciples of the True Sword sect. Among the foreign swordsmen, nearly 200 had become official disciples of the True Sword sect. All of a sudden, the number of official disciples of the True Sword sect had increased by 400. Among the foreign swordsmen, a small number had reached the God Condensation realm. Among them, a dozen had passed the test and become elite disciples of the True Sword sect. As for the core disciples, there were still more than 20. The number of official disciples increased faster, the elite disciples slower, and the core disciples had the hardest time. After recruiting new disciples, the true sword sect's overall strength had increased by quite a bit. Even though the requirements for recruiting new disciples were very strict, and every single one of them had a much higher talent than normal people, only a few hundred astral realm sword artists would not have much of an impact on the overall strength of the true sword sect. They were all new blood, and only when they matured would they be able to truly strengthen the true sword sect. After recruiting new disciples, Chu Mu cultivated for a while. He had made up his mind to leave the true sword sect. Unexpectedly, Elder Yun Feng came looking for him. Elder Yun Feng was in charge of the Wind Trust Hall. He specialized in collecting all kinds of information. After several months of continuous collection, he had finally collected information related to the Divine Pearl. It seemed that a Divine Pearl had appeared in the firmament territory not long ago. However, the level of the real sword sect was too low, so it was already good enough for them to know about it. More specifically, they had no idea and could not even be sure. For Chu Mu, this was enough. Therefore, he left the true sword sect and headed for the firmament territory. Currently, the true sword sect could be considered to have stabilized. Ordinary matters could be left to the two elders, Yun Feng and Yun He. If there were any major matters, they could be decided by the Supreme Elder. Originally, Yun Feng and Yun He had suggested that Chu Mu bring Yang Zhen away. However, Chu Mu had Yang Zhen stay behind to oversee the true sword sect. After all, aside from the Grand Elder, the true sword sect truly lacked experts overseeing it. A first heaven stage expert was just barely enough. The firmament territory didn't belong to the Kanglan dynasty. It was located outside the Kanglan dynasty's territory. After flying for a whole month on the giant sword airship, they still hadn't left the Kanglan dynasty's territory. During this month, staying in the giant sword airship, there was no way to practice swordsmanship or cultivation technique. Chu Mu could only comprehend the eternal sword momentum every day and absorb the swordsmanship experience of the 5 spirits sword saint to improve his swordsmanship realm as much as possible. As for the sword sect spiritual seal, he hadn't entered it since he was instantly killed by Bai Ling. When one's swordsmanship reached Chu Mu's level, it was even more difficult to improve. Fortunately, he had the eternal sword momentum to comprehend and the experience of the 5 spirits sword saint to refer to and absorb. Therefore, during this period, Chu Mu's swordsmanship attainments also improved rapidly. Apart from cultivating, Chu Mu would also think of other people. Of the human clan swordsmen who had entered the deep blue world with him, he had only seen Renli so far. He hadn't seen the others, not even the other alien races. Thinking about it, when the experts of the deep blue world attacked, a considerable number of them should have been killed. The deep blue world was also quite vast. Some of them were killed, while the rest were scattered. It wouldn't be so easy to meet. But thinking about it, people like Gu Wankong shouldn't have been killed. With their talent and ability, they might have had a fortuitous encounter in the deep blue world. Their current strength should be much stronger than before. Suddenly, there was a feeling of anticipation in his heart. He was looking forward to meeting them. Competing with the same generation of monsters was undoubtedly a very pleasant and wonderful thing. During this month, Chu Mu also saw many experts flying across the sky. There were also some airships of different sizes, but Chu Mu didn't have any trouble with them. After all, as long as one was not a lunatic, one would not casually cause trouble. After cultivating to this level, one's knowledge was not so shallow. They all understood that instead of wasting their time on useless trouble, it was better to be a little more obedient and only make a move when necessary. Multitasking, he hurried along while comprehending. In the direction where the great sword ship was coming from, a black flowing light appeared. That light was like a black rainbow. It was extremely fast. With a whoosh, it swept past the great sword ship not far away. Chu Mu could vaguely see the figure in the black rainbow. He could feel the fluctuations of the aura emitted by the black rainbow. It's a little familiar. Chumu fell into deep thought. At this moment, there were a few more flowing lights that chased after him. They looked murderous, as if they were chasing after the black flowing light from before. Without a doubt, this was another scene of escape and pursuit. Logically, Chumu wouldn't pay attention to it. However, he felt that the figure in the black rainbow and the aura emitted were a little familiar, as if he had seen them somewhere before. With a thought, Chumu was certain that this person must be a human swordsman who entered the deep blue world with him. Furthermore, he gave him a sense of familiarity, which meant that he had some impression of this person. After quickly eliminating the possibility, Chumu could vaguely determine who that person was. As for whether it was him or not, he would only know after taking a closer look. They were both humans and he knew them. There was no reason for Chumu to ignore them when they were being pursued. The great sword ship changed direction and quickly chased after the flowing lights. The great sword ship was even faster. It didn't take long for it to catch up to those people. It quickly overtook them and chased after the black rainbow. After carefully sensing the aura of the black rainbow, Chumu was even more certain of this person's identity. Feeling the approach of the great sword ship, although he was surprised, he thought it was an enemy and wanted to escape again with a burst of speed. However, although his speed was fast, he still couldn't compare with the great sword ship. "Tsuyoshi, come up." Suddenly, a voice rang in the ears of the figure in the black rainbow. Tsuyoshi was startled and her speed decreased. Tsuyoshi's thoughts turned quickly. Not only did this person know her name, but he also spoke as if he knew her before, which was different from the pursuers. While she was guessing, the great sword ship flew to the side of the black rainbow and moved forward side by side. The door of the great sword ship opened, allowing Tsuyoshi to see the person inside. "It's you." Tsuyoshi lost her voice. Originally, with her temperament, she would not lose her composure like this. However, when she entered the deep blue world, she was chased by the elites of the deep blue world. She narrowly escaped death and used many life-saving means to escape. After that, she wandered around alone. She did not know how to complete the mission. Occasionally, she had a fortuitous encounter and her cultivation strength improved a lot. However, she still had no clue about the mission. She could only wander around and look for opportunities. Since entering the deep blue world, she had never met a human compatriot. She did not expect that at this moment when she was being chased, she would meet a person who had left a deep impression on her. Chumu. First on the Tianqing list, Chumu of the Starry Sky, the peerless evildoer who had the title of unparalleled true sword. From dissatisfaction at the beginning to admiration at the end, although she did not admit it on the surface, her heart was so. Tsuyoshi was also a proud person. Whether it was appearance, figure, talent, or strength, she was far superior to many of her peers. At this moment, she was being chased. She could meet anyone else, but the one she did not want to meet the most was Chumu. Because of this, Tsuyoshi was so speechless. "It's me. Come on up." Chumu smiled slightly. He was in a good mood to meet an old friend in a foreign land, who was also on the Tianqing list. Tsuyoshi hesitated for a moment, her thoughts a little complicated. In the end, she flashed into the giant sword. The door of the ship closed, and it suddenly rushed forward. It quickly changed direction and maximized its speed. With a boom, it was like a sword light across the sky, heading in the direction of the firmament territory. Those who were chasing after Tsuyoshi could only watch as the great sword ship quickly left in front of their eyes. Eventually, it turned into a small black dot and disappeared. It was not that they did not chase, but the great sword ship's speed was too fast and unexpected. "Damn it, I actually let that woman escape. That airship was too unexpected. I wonder who it is?" According to our information, this woman should not have any accomplices. How could this airship save her? These people were puzzled. Obviously, they knew a little about Tsuyoshi. Now the problem is not this, but this woman has been rescued. When we go back, how to explain it to the young master? As soon as these words came out, everyone's face suddenly changed. They felt uneasy when they thought of the young master's means. Things are beyond our expectations. What can we do if we tell the truth? With our strength and status, at most we will be punished. Damn it, if I know who saved that woman, I will catch him, skin him, and pull out his tendons. They had threatened to skin the person and pull out his tendons, but now they were a little embarrassed. The giant sword was a single-person airship. The internal space was not big. It was a little spacious to accommodate one person, but it was a little difficult to accommodate two people. As soon as Tsuyoshi came in, bursts of fragrance filled the small space. Because the door was closed, the fragrance did not dissipate. Also because the internal space was not big enough, although Tsuyoshi tried to lean to the other side as much as possible, their bodies inevitably touched. Speaking of which, the relationship between the two was just ordinary. They had never been so close to each other, so it was inevitable that they felt a little strange when they touched each other. Chu-mu was devoted to the sword principle, but he was not an unromantic person. He just had his own persistence and goals. In the current situation, he could only accept it. He diverted his attention. On the contrary, women were undoubtedly more emotional. Tsuyueshi's cheeks were slightly red, and she had mixed feelings. Chapter 1355. In the azure sky, the giant sword-flying ship swept past and flew rapidly out of the Kanglan dynasty. It headed north and headed straight for the firmament territory. Now Chu-mu was not alone. Tsuyueshi was with him. No matter what, the two came from the same place and were both top 10 geniuses on the Heaven Talent list. Although they were not familiar with each other and even a little unhappy, it was just a competition between them, not a conflict of interest or hatred. In the giant sword airship, at first, their bodies touched each other and they were a little uncomfortable and awkward. But Chu-mu quickly adjusted, ignoring the outside world and comprehending swordsmanship while piloting the airship. Tsuyueshi was a woman after all. She was more emotional and uncomfortable for a longer time. But after all, she was a sword cultivator. She had a tough heart and quickly adjusted. Chu-mu did not speak, and neither did Tsuyueshi. The two had one thing in common, which was that they did not talk much. Tsuyueshi was very proud. Seeing Chu-mu not saying a word, she thought he did not want to talk to her, so she did not speak either, although she had many questions in her heart. This lasted for more than a month. In the end, Tsuyueshi could not help but speak first. After all, Tsuyueshi was a woman. Her body was in constant contact with a man. Even if she had a tough heart and wanted to divert her attention, after a long time, she would occasionally realize this. In addition, there were many questions in her heart. She wanted to speak but had to be patient. She hesitated again, and finally, the questions kept piling up. Your cultivation has risen to the middle stage of the fifth heaven. Tsuyueshi opened her mouth. She did not know what to say for a moment, so she said casually, but her tone was a little stiff. You have reached the sixth heaven. Chu-mu said casually, his tone indifferent. As soon as he spoke, the tense atmosphere suddenly dissipated. Tsuyueshi's body seemed to be relaxed. She realized that Chu-mu seemed to be different from her impression. Although the two knew each other, there was no friendship between them. Tsuyueshi's understanding of Chu-mu was only limited to his strength and talent. She knew nothing about his character. Tsuyueshi felt that Chu-mu was number 1 on the Tianqing ranking, a peerless genius in the starry sky. Even Gu Luankong was inferior to him. Such a person must be very proud, and proud people were not easy to get along with. Geniuses were prideful, and evildoers were even more prideful. This was almost universal. Tsuyueshi also knew her own character, so she thought so. However, when he spoke now, although Chu-mu's tone was flat, there was no arrogance in it. While she was surprised, Tsuyueshi also felt comfortable in her heart. Her impression of Chu-mu had changed a lot. What clues do you have? Tsuyueshi's tone was not as stiff as the first sentence. The secret of the spirit of the world is probably related to the 18 divine pearls. Chu-mu did not hide anything, except for the fact that he had already obtained a deep blue divine pearl. This time I heard that a divine pearl appeared in the firmament territory, Tsuyueshi said. Her tone also let Chu-mu know that Tsuyueshi also knew about the 18 divine pearls and the secret of the world. However, he did not know whether Tsuyueshi had obtained the deep blue divine pearl. Although the two were a little familiar with each other, they had not reached the point where they completely trusted each other. The deep blue divine pearl was of great importance and could not be easily revealed. As for why Tsuyueshi was being chased and why she did not escape in the direction of the firmament territory, Chu-mu did not ask, because he thought it was unnecessary. The two did not talk much. After a few words, they did not know what to say, so they simply stopped talking. After a while, they would casually talk again, and later on, they would talk about cultivation. Towards Chu-mu's sword technique, Tsuyueshi was actually very impressed. This could be considered an opportunity, so she asked Chu-mu for guidance. Geniuses were proud, and evildoers were even more proud. However, their pride wasn't arrogance and conceit. In areas where they weren't good at and needed to improve, they would humbly ask for guidance. They weren't ashamed to ask for guidance. This was a true evildoer. Those who thought that they had some talent and ability and looked down on others were frogs in a well, ignorant and arrogant mediocre people. Even if they had some talent, it would be difficult for them to achieve anything in the end. Tsuyueshi sincerely asked for advice, so Chu-mu naturally would not refuse. However, he was not overly enthusiastic either. He just gave her some advice, which made Tsuyueshi suddenly understand. Then, she immersed herself in her comprehension and did not speak anymore. The firmament territory was located in the north of the Kanglan dynasty. Its structure was different from that of the dynasty. The firmament holy place was the leader, and the founder of the firmament holy place was the firmament saint emperor. It could be said that the firmament territory was so named because of the firmament holy place. With the speed of the giant sword, it took nearly 3 months to leave the territory of the Kanglan dynasty and enter the firmament territory. It had to be said that the territory of the Kanglan dynasty was very broad. In the first month, Chu-mu and Tsuyueshi did not speak a word. Later, Tsuyueshi spoke first and occasionally chatted with Chu-mu. In the last month, because of the discussion of cultivation and Tsuyueshi's advice on swordsmanship, the two gradually became more and more conversational. The territory of the firmament territory was very broad, not inferior to that of the Kanglan dynasty at all. Sky Gate City was the first city of the Kanglan dynasty after entering the firmament territory. It was named Sky Gate City, which meant that it was the gateway to the firmament territory. As a border city, Sky Gate City was not only big enough, but also had a large flow of people. Some of them were from the Kanglan dynasty, some were from the firmament territory, and a small number were from other places. In the bustling Sky Gate City, the streets were wide and could accommodate more than 10 carriages without being crowded. At this time, many people stopped and looked in one direction, which was the direction of the south gate. Their eyes fell on 2 figures. One of them was dressed in a moon-white robe. He had an elegant demeanor and an indifferent expression. More importantly, the aura he exuded was as sharp as an unsheathed divine sword, causing the surrounding people to involuntarily shiver. The other person was in a black gauze robe, with purple light faintly flashing. Her face was extremely enchanting, and her temperament was cold and charming. She could be called a peerless beauty. This man and woman were Chu-mu and Tsuyueshi. None of them raised any objections, and they just walked together in a natural manner. On the giant sword ship, the two of them had reached an agreement. Although they had received news that a divine bead had appeared in the firmament territory was not small. They did not know where the divine bead had appeared, so they had to investigate further. The problem was that the two of them were alone, and there was no way to find out. Fortunately, there were all kinds of industries in this world, and naturally there was an industry that specialized in selling information. Chumu and Tsuyueshi's current purpose was to find a place to sell information, and by information, related to the divine bead. After all, those who specialized in selling information tended to be more extensive and proficient. Tsuyueshi showed the demeanor of a witch. A witch could charm all people. When she was cold, she was as cold as frost, making people unapproachable. When she was enchanting, she could make people fall to their knees. Chumu also witnessed Tsuyueshi's unique charm. Under her questioning, those who knew the truth told her everything clearly. They even told her their 18 generations of ancestors. Chumu couldn't help but laugh at this scene. Tsuyueshi rolled her eyes at Chumu, full of charm. After the two of them became familiar with each other, they were not as distant as before. In the Sky Gate City, there is an organization that specializes in selling information called the Wind Tower. Tsuyueshi walked to Chumu's side and said in a pleasant voice. Her tone was very different from her previous stiff and cold tone. "Let's go to the Wind Tower," Chumu said. The two of them walked together and headed to the so-called Wind Tower. Chumu's sharp aura made people not dare to approach him. Only Tsuyueshi, who had a higher cultivation than Chumu, could withstand it. As an organization that specialized in selling information, the Wind Tower had no intention of hiding. Moreover, the business of the Wind Tower was huge, covering almost the entire deep blue world. It could be said that if they didn't know about all kinds of information in the deep blue world, then most people wouldn't know either. The Wind Tower was indeed a building. It had a total of 9 floors and could be considered one of the tallest buildings in the Sky Gate City. It was majestic. There were 3 large green-gold words on the plaque. The strokes were like dragons and snakes. It had the sharpness of gold and the lightness of wind. It could be seen that the person who wrote these 3 words had deep attainments in the power of gold and the power of wind. Chumu and Tsuyueshi were both peerless geniuses and monsters. They had seen many big scenes and were not afraid at all. Naturally, they strode into the Wind Tower. As soon as they entered, the two of them had different temperament. One was sharp and the other was cold and enchanting. They immediately attracted attention. The eyes of the person in charge of the first floor of the Wind Tower immediately lit up. He strode over and greeted them personally. For a large organization like the Wind Tower, the person in charge of the first floor naturally had outstanding ability. After interacting with people for many years, he had trained a pair of sharp eyes. The temperament of Chumu and Tsuyueshi made him feel that these two were not ordinary. They were either peerless geniuses or came from a powerful force, or both. The Wind Tower was indeed a large organization that spread throughout the deep blue world. However, the Wind Tower in Sky Gate City was only an insignificant part of it. The person in charge of the first floor only had an ordinary status in the entire Wind Tower. If he could make friends with peerless geniuses, not only would it be beneficial for him, it would also be beneficial for the Wind Tower. This had always been the Wind Tower's motto. The person came forward and asked politely. The main business of the Wind Tower was the trading of information. They also did other businesses. Only in this way could they support the operation of a large force. "We want to buy information about the God Orb," Chumu said. The person trembled. Information about the deep blue God Orb was big news. It was a big deal. His eyes shone brightly. However, whether the other party had the ability to pay was another question. Chapter 1356. The Wind Tower had 9 floors, and each floor was taller than the last. This was not only in terms of appearance, but also in terms of status. Under the lead of the person in charge of the first floor, Chumu and Tsuyueshi arrived at the 7th floor. Wind Whispering Tower had its own rules. Not everyone could casually open their mouths to buy or sell any information they wanted. This was especially true for information of great value, such as the deep blue sacred pearl. Any piece of information was extremely valuable. To avoid people who did not know the situation, the Wind Tower had set up the corresponding rules. After all, it was an organization that mainly dealt with information. As long as it did not offend its interests or directly target it, it would not be ruthless. The rule of the Wind Tower was that if one wanted to buy information of great value, they had to prove that they had the right to pay. It was very simple. They just had to take out 1,000,000 high-grade origin pills as a deposit. If they bought the information they wanted, they could pay the price themselves or pay with a deposit. If they paid more, they could pay more. This was the first time that Chu-Mu and Tsuyoshi had come to buy information. There were no records in the Wind Tower, so they did not object to the rules. They did not have the right to do so. Unless Chu-Mu and Tsuyoshi were Saint Kings, even if they were sword saints of the 9 heavens of eternity, the Wind Tower would not give them any face. When they arrived at the 7th floor, the person in charge of the 1st floor left. "Esteemed guests, please have a seat." The person in charge of the 7th floor was a middle-aged man with white hair. His ordinary face seemed a little old, but his eyes shone with wisdom. Chu-Mu and Tsuyoshi sat down, facing the middle-aged man across an old black wooden table. "I am Du Qian. Esteemed guests, what business do you want?" the middle-aged man asked with a smile. Du Qian, who often interacted with people, knew how to make people feel comfortable. He also knew what kind of tone to use to make people lower their guard so that they could communicate better. Therefore, a seemingly ordinary sentence had a charm that others did not have under his tone and expression. Hearing this, Chu-Mu faintly smiled. Talking to such a person would make one feel comfortable. "We want information about the deep blue pearl," Chu-Mu said. He used "we" instead of "I," which meant that he and Tsuyoshi were working together. Deep blue god pearl. When Du Qian heard this, he immediately revealed a shocked expression. A transaction that could reach the 7th floor was definitely a relatively large transaction. However, the deep blue divine pearl still exceeded Du Qian's expectations. "Esteemed guest, there's quite a bit of information about the deep blue deity pearl. Added together, it's worth a lot," Du Qian said slowly. "How do we calculate it?" Chu-Mu asked. Tsuyoshi had not spoken since she entered the Wind Tower. She left everything to Chu-Mu. Any news related to the deep blue sacred pearl is worth at least 1,000,000 upper-grade primordial elixirs. There are dozens of news related to the deep blue sacred pearl in the Wind Listening Tower. Du Qian did not continue. Chu-Mu was shocked when he heard this. At least 1,000,000 high-grade elemental elixirs. It seemed like he was too arrogant when he said that he wanted to buy the information related to the deep blue divine pearl. Even if one piece of information cost 1,000,000, dozens of pieces would cost tens of millions. Moreover, 1,000,000 was the lowest standard. Some of the higher ones cost millions or even tens of millions. Chu-Mu had some wealth now, but it was only relatively speaking. After the consumption of his upper-grade primordial elixirs, he only had a few million left. Tsuyoshi also had some wealth, but the two of them together probably did not have more than 10 million upper-grade primordial elixirs. "I heard that a sacred pearl appeared in the firmament territory not long ago. We want to know the whereabouts of the sacred pearl," Chu-Mu said. "This news has been very popular recently, but its value is not low. It costs 2 million upper-grade primordial elixirs," Du Qian said with a slight smile. "Okay." Although the price was high, Chu-Mu did not refuse. If he ran out of primordial elixirs, he could get more. 8 months ago, a deep blue sacred pearl appeared in an auction held in Sky Wing City. But at that time, the sacred pearl was covered in dust and very few people could recognize it. It was won by a 3-star saint. Du Qian gave a simple introduction. The 3-star saint left immediately after winning the sacred pearl, and was then chased down. He fled into the Black Demon Pool with serious injuries. The experts of the various forces in the firmament territory also rushed into the Black Demon Pool, and some experts from other places also rushed into the Black Demon Pool after hearing the news. What kind of place is the Black Demon Pool? Chu Mu could not help asking. The Black Demon Pool is located in the northeast corner of the Firmament Territory. It is one of the most dangerous places in the Firmament Territory, where the Black Demon beasts and the Black Demon race reside. It is very dangerous. Du Qian did not refuse and began to explain. Information such as the geographical location of the Black Demon Pool and various other information was not valuable, and was relatively public information in the Firmament Territory. Chu Mu and Du Qian came from other places, so it was normal that they did not know. Anyway, Du Qian would not be so stingy. The Black Demon Pool also has another characteristic, which is that the Yuan Qi of the universe is thin, and the Dark Demon Qi is rich. Moreover, it has a mysterious power. If a saint-level expert enters, his essence, Qi, and spirit will be suppressed and reduced to below the saint level. Only Saint-Emperor-level experts can resist that mysterious power. The Black Demon race is very powerful, and humans of the same level are often no match for them. Moreover, the Black Demon race people are simple in intelligence, more bestial than rational, fierce and cruel, and have a dissolute nature. Any human who enters the Black Demon Pool, once discovered by the Black Demon race, will be immediately chased down or captured. There is no escape. A long time ago, there were human race experts who went out on a large scale, intending to wipe out the Black Demon race and take over the Black Demon Pool. In the end, they suffered heavy losses, and less than 10% escaped. Most of them were seriously injured, and were basically crippled. A small number of them survived, but the Black Demon Pool became their inner demon. Usually, no one is willing to enter the Black Demon Abyss. But this time, for the sake of a dark blue divine pearl, many experts have risked their lives to enter. It's really crazy. Du Qian finally sighed. House Master Du, can you tell us more about the Black Demon Pool in detail? If the price is Yuan Dan, Chu Mu said. Su Yueshi also showed an attentive look. Du Qian took a deep look at Chu Mu, saying, "This is not a secret. Since the two of you want to know, I will tell you what I know." Immediately, Du Qian told Chu Mu and Su Yueshi more detailed information about the Black Demon Pool, so that Chu Mu and Su Yueshi could have a more intuitive understanding of the Black Demon Pool. In Du Qian's view, the two peerless geniuses wanted to enter the Black Demon Pool. Until now, our Wind Listening Tower still has no news about the Divine Pearl. It is most likely still in the Black Demon Pool. Your Excellencies, forgive me for speaking out of turn, but the Black Demon Pool is too dangerous. It is best not to enter. After talking about the Black Demon Pool, Du Qian thought for a moment and then said, "Since the Black Demon Pool is so dangerous, we may not necessarily enter." Chu Mu said, took out 1,000,000 high-grade Yuan Dan and handed it to Du Qian, and then got up to leave with Su Yueshi. "Please wait a moment," Du Qian said. Immediately, he took out an item and handed it to Chu Mu, saying, "Your transaction with the Wind Listening Tower has reached 2 million, and you are qualified to receive a token of the Wind Listening Tower. This is the Wind Listening Copper Token, a symbol of the identity of a distinguished guest of the Wind Listening Tower. After you drip a drop of blood on it, this token will have your aura, and can only be used once. With the token of the Wind Listening Tower, you will not need to pay a deposit to buy any information in the future. In addition, the Wind Listening Copper Token will give you a 10% discount when buying information or treasures from the Wind Listening Tower," Du Qian said. "Thank you very much." Chu Mu naturally took the Wind Listening Token and poured his divine remembrance into it to examine it. Everything was normal, so he dripped his blood on it to recognize it as its master. Indeed, it was as Du Qian had said. The Wind Listening Tower's token only had a restriction that could only accept one master. The second time it was used, it would shatter. This was to prevent the Wind Listening Token from being stolen after a VIP was killed. I hope to see you use this token in the future, Du Qian said, looking at Chu Mu's back. I definitely will, Chu Mu replied. With Du Qian's eyesight, he could naturally see that Chu Mu and the other person were planning to enter the Black Demon Abyss. He could not help but secretly sigh. The temperament of these two people made Du Qian certain that they were two peerless geniuses, especially Chu Mu, who was even more outstanding. Du Qian believed that his eyesight would not be wrong. This was also why he was willing to introduce the Black Demon Abyss in such detail, and why he eventually took out the wind-listening copper token and gave it to Chu Mu. In fact, a transaction of 2 million high-grade yuan elixirs would at most qualify one to receive the wind-listening iron token. Only transactions of 10 million yuan and above would qualify one to receive the wind-listening copper token. However, Du Qian found Chu Mu very pleasing to the eye, and also felt that Chu Mu was not an ordinary person. Furthermore, he himself had some authority, so he gave the wind-listening copper token to Chu Mu, but did not tell Chu Mu clearly. Gifting was a kind of friendly attitude. If it was said clearly, it would be a way of asking for credit, and would easily arouse ill feelings. If Chu Mu had a transaction with the wind-listening tower in the future, he would naturally understand the mystery. If not, it would be a waste of an opportunity. Su Yueshi did not receive the wind-listening tower token, but that was also normal. After all, the high-grade yuan elixirs were paid by Chu Mu, so Su Yueshi did not have any dissatisfaction. After leaving the wind-listening tower, Su Yueshi took out 1 million high-grade yuan elixirs and gave it to Chu Mu. I received this token. It will also be beneficial for me to buy information in the future. Chu Mu did not accept it, and motioned to the wind-listening copper token. That has nothing to do with me, Su Yueshi said. She had her own principles, and Chu Mu could only accept the 1 million high-grade yuan elixirs. At the same time, he secretly thought that Su Yueshi was really headstrong and stubborn. I plan to enter the Black Demon Abyss. What about you? Chu Mu asked as the yuan elixirs were just a small matter. Enter. Su Yueshi's reply was concise and comprehensive, which was within Chu Mu's expectations. Then let's go, Chu Mu said. From Du Qian, Chu Mu already knew the location of the Black Demon Abyss. Together with Su Yueshi, they left Tianmen City. Outside the city, Chu Mu once again took out the giant sword flying ship. As soon as she saw the giant sword flying ship, Su Yueshi remembered that she had been in contact with Chu Mu for several months. Her cheeks flushed slightly as their bodies touched. Chapter 1357. Su Yueshi did not know why she did not resist. Perhaps it was because she had gotten used to it after a few months of interaction. Although she thought so, her cheeks were still flushed red. The giant sword set off from outside Tianmen City, and at its fastest speed, rapidly flew in the direction of the Black Demon Abyss. Like a meteor streaking across the sky, it flashed past and disappeared into the distance. In the sky, from time to time, one could see other airships being overtaken by the giant sword. The airships of the deep blue world were divided into two types, ordinary and combat. Ordinary airships referred to airships that did not possess any offensive power, while combat airships possessed offensive power. According to size, there were super small, medium, large, and so on. According to grade, they were divided into low-level airships, mid-level airships, high-level airships, and super airship. Different grades of airships had extremely obvious differences in flying speed, explosive speed, hull strength, offensive power, and other aspects. The giant sword airship was a super small mid-level combat airship, and its value was not low. An airship that could overtake the giant sword airship at full speed was at least a high-level airship, and its value was even higher. Of course, at the same size and grade, the value of a combat airship was far higher than that of an ordinary airship. After all, it was not easy to possess offensive power. Chu Mu divided his attention, controlling the airship to fly while comprehending the eternal sword momentum. Although the efficiency was not as high as wholeheartedly comprehending, it was better than nothing. Tsuyoshi did not speak, and her flushed cheeks returned to normal. After glancing at Chumu, she closed her eyes and gradually immersed herself in her own cultivation. The trip to the deep blue world was a great disaster for some people because they were all dead. Some of them didn't even enter the deep blue world and died in the passage. Some of them died under the pursuit of the native experts of the deep blue world. And those who successfully entered the deep blue world, some had nothing to do, while some had coincidentally obtained some opportunities. Geniuses like Chumu and Tsuyoshi, who were on the Tianqing leaderboard, already had extraordinary luck. With the support of the Tianqing leaderboard's luck, the chances of them getting lucky were many times higher than ordinary people. For example, Chumu was hunted down the moment he entered the deep blue world. After a narrow escape, he entered the Five Spirits mystery realm. That was one of the benefits of having great fortune. After leaving the Sky-Bearing Academy, he was hunted down by the people of the Skyblaze sect. After escaping, he met the dying deputy sect leader of the Real Sword sect and received the recognition of the Sword sect's spiritual seal. The Sword sect's spiritual seal was a mysterious thing. The secrets it contained were still unsolved. However, Chumu's battle with the other candidates and his enlightenment from the invincible Bai Ling had allowed him to achieve a breakthrough in his swordsmanship, allowing him to reach a whole new level. From the outside to the inside, he had a sword in his heart. Just the state of having a sword in his heart alone was more than what he had gained from the Five Spirits mystic pagoda aside from the deep blue divine pearl. This was because the state of the sword was the foundation. Once he successfully deciphered the secrets of the Sword sect's spiritual seal, Chumu couldn't imagine what it would be. It might even be above the state of having a sword in his heart. Although Tsuyoshi's fortune wasn't as good as Chumu's, she still had some gains. Her cultivation base had only risen to the sixth sky of Nirvana realm. After flying for about half a month, Chumu and Tsuyoshi suddenly felt the giant sword ship shake violently. There was even a roar in their ears. Chumu's expression changed slightly. This was because he had already discovered that someone was attacking the giant sword ship. No, to be precise, there were other battleships attacking the giant sword ship. Just now, the giant sword ship had used its own protective shield to block an attack. Its protective shield had lost more than half of its energy. It could only withstand one more attack at most. Chumu didn't know why it was being attacked. Now wasn't the time to find out. He temporarily put down the comprehension of the eternal sword momentum and focused on controlling the battleship. Otherwise, once the giant sword ship was destroyed and exploded, the terrifying power might directly kill the two of them. Even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured. No one was willing to die for no reason. Chumu's heart was slightly angry. He immediately calmed down, but his eyes flashed with a touch of sharpness. No matter who you were, no matter what your purpose was, as long as you attacked the giant sword ship and threatened his life, then you were an enemy. If you were an enemy, then you should be killed. Tsuyoshi, sit tight. After Chumu reminded her, the giant sword ship suddenly made a big rotation under the control of his spiritual sense. After turning into an arc, it narrowly avoided an attack. That attack was a crimson ray. It was as thick as a thigh and was extremely fast. It was like an aurora and contained terrifying power. The giant sword ship was like a flying bird. After making a beautiful arc, it faced the battleship at the back. The size of the battleship was slightly larger than the giant sword ship. It should be a small battleship. Its appearance was like an eagle. The crimson energy ray just now was shot out from one of the eyes of the eagle battleship. The moment the giant sword ship dodged and rotated, Chumu had already begun to charge the weapon. He locked onto the target and fired. With a boom, a bright yellow ray of light was shot out from the tip of the giant sword ship like an aurora. It was extremely fast and shot towards the Eagle battleship. The pilot of the Eagle battleship was very proficient in piloting the battleship. He dodged in an instant, causing Chu Mu's attack to miss. While dodging, the Eagle battleship's eyes lit up with 2 rays of red light. With 2 whooshing sounds, 2 rays of light flew out and shot towards the giant sword ship. Chu Mu's pupils shrank as he felt a sense of destruction. Tsuyueshi's pretty face also changed, but she did not interfere with Chu Mu. At this time, the battleship could not stop, because a slight pause would be seized by the experts on the battleship and destroyed in an instant. Under a strong sense of crisis, Chu Mu controlled the giant sword ship and quickly dodged, narrowly avoiding the 2 rays. However, one of the rays still brushed past, causing a portion of the defensive energy to be lost. Smash it! Inside the Eagle flying ship, a person laughed loudly and gave out orders as if he was talking about squashing an ant to death. Chu Mu's face was dignified. He was only familiar with piloting the battleship, but not proficient. After all, he only learned and did not spend time on it. On the other hand, the Eagle battleship's movements were very precise. It can be seen that the person controlling the Eagle battleship has reached a level of control that is difficult for others to reach. If this continues, Chu Mu will be in danger. With a high degree of concentration, Chu Mu locked onto the Eagle battleship from thousands of meters away. His eyes flashed with silver light. He was observing the movements of the Eagle battleship, preparing to learn and improve his control of the battleship. This is a last-minute sharpening. It may not be useless. There is no doubt that Chu Mu's perception is amazing, and his learning ability is also very strong. His ability to control the battleship is gradually improving. To be able to learn in battle, what an amazing talent, but it is more interesting to kill such a person. The eyes of the Eagle battleship's controller turned scarlet as if he had seen a delicious prey. Dodging, counterattacking, the 2 battleships began to fight. The Eagle battleship seemed to be a bit like a cat playing with a mouse. In the distance, some battleships stopped, and some flying experts also stopped to watch the battle. That sword-shaped battleship is going to lose. Yes, the Eagle battleship's controller is very proficient in piloting the battleship. It is obviously better than the sword-shaped battleship. Everyone was optimistic about the Eagle battleship, but they were not optimistic about the giant sword battleship. They would not help either. After all, they did not know each other, and the Eagle battleship's controller was very skilled. They were not willing to provoke such a strong enemy. In the giant sword battleship, Tsuyueshi looked calm, but she was actually nervous. Chu Mu's face was dignified, but his eyes were shining. He learned in the battle with the Eagle battleship and then understood. The state of having a sword in the heart once again played a great role, because Chu Mu suddenly thought that piloting the battleship was also like controlling the sword in one's hand. There was a sense of homogeneity between the 2. Under this enlightenment, Chu Mu treated the giant sword battleship as the sword in his hand. Suddenly there was a feeling of success. It was logical and he could control it more easily. Of course, the battleship was not a sword after all. There would always be a little difference. Perhaps only when the sword art reached a higher level could it reach the point where everything was a sword. Even so, Chu Mu felt as if he had merged with the battleship, and a feeling of being one with the sword arose spontaneously. The battleship and the person seemed to be connected by blood. The battleship seemed to have become his body, and he seemed to have become the core of the battleship. Under the strange feeling, Chu Mu's thoughts moved and he easily dodged the Eagle flying ship's energy beam. Moreover, he rapidly approached. What's going on? Could it be that the controller of the battleship has changed? The giant sword battleship's movements were completely different from before. It was much more brilliant, and it made everyone stunned. The bright yellow energy transformed into a cannonball. After approaching and dodging, it increased its speed in a very subtle way, and appeared at the side of the Eagle battleship and blasted out. A direct hit caused the Eagle battleship to tremble violently, and a lot of its defensive energy was consumed. The Eagle battleship quickly counterattacked, but was easily avoided by the giant sword battleship. In the situation where the person and the battleship were one, Chu Mu's control of the battleship had reached the pinnacle, just like the sword in his hand when he was one with the sword. Attack! The bright yellow energy shot out, once again hitting the Eagle battleship. The Eagle battleship was a small high-level battleship, and the strength of its defensive shield was much stronger than that of the giant sword battleship. But at this time, it had become a target. Damn it, counterattack and destroy it. Inside the Eagle battleship, the person who gave the order was flustered and exasperated. An expert, an absolute expert. No, we can't continue to fight, otherwise we may be killed. Young lord, I suggest we leave immediately. I think the direction of the battleship may also be heading to the Black Demon Abyss. At that time, we will act and capture it. That's right, that battleship looks like a super small battleship. It is estimated that there is only one person, at most two. Okay, let's go. Remember, when the time comes, we must capture it. I want him to be in a dilemma. With a roar and an order, the Eagle battleship burst into speed and rapidly left. Chapter 1358. After all, the Eagle airship was a level higher than the giant sword airship, and its speed was much faster. At full speed, it suddenly left the giant sword airship behind and sped off in the direction of the Black Demon Abyss. In the state of being one with the airship, Chu Mu's understanding of the giant sword airship was as familiar as his understanding of his own body. It was as if the giant sword airship was another body of his. Chu Mu could easily bring out the maximum speed of the giant sword airship. There was no need for a short period of propulsion, and he could also easily burst out at a speed that exceeded the limit. Even so, the speed of the giant sword airship was only a little faster than before, and could not be compared with a high-grade airship. Although he could not destroy the Eagle airship, it was also a great gain for Chu Mu to understand that airships and swords were the same. He suddenly had an idea. Since he could use the airship as a sword, then, could other things also be used as a sword? This discovery caused Chu Mu to abruptly be shocked. Unknowingly, he had touched upon a higher level of swordsmanship than the sword in the heart. It was just that Chu Mu had just broken through to the sword in the heart realm not long ago, and had only consolidated the beginner level of the sword in the heart realm. There was still a big gap from the higher level. Therefore, Chu Mu still did not understand the higher level of swordsmanship than the sword in the heart realm. He was in a completely ignorant state and was not clear about it. However, this could be regarded as a good foundation for his future breakthrough after he reached the peak of the sword in the heart realm. In the state of being one with the airship, some divine sense power would be consumed, but with Chu Mu's tremendous divine sense power and recovery speed, it was nothing. Enjoying this feeling was more free than a bird soaring in the sky, and more comfortable than a fish swimming in the water. His face was clear, and his eyes were as deep as the stars. Tsuyoshi just took a glance and was suddenly taken aback. She did not know why, but her heart suddenly jumped, and her cheeks unconsciously flushed. She hurriedly looked away, took a deep breath, and calmed down. Her flushed cheeks also returned to normal. Chu Mu wholeheartedly controlled the airship. This feeling was really too good. All of a sudden, he gained a deeper understanding of the two realms of one with the sword and sword in the heart. Bai Ling had said that becoming one with the sword was only on the surface level. Having a sword in one's heart meant entering one's heart. That was Bai Ling's explanation. Now, by chance, Chu Mu, who had comprehended the unity of man and flying ship, had his own understanding of the unity of man and the sword in the heart. The unity of man and sword stopped at the material level, which was the physical level. It was a level that could be touched because the sword was an extension of one's arm. It was like an arm that grew out of one's body. It could be seen and touched. With a sword in one's heart, it would rise to the spiritual level. It couldn't be seen or touched, and could only be sensed. Going from something to nothing was a qualitative sublimation. After all, other people's understanding was still other people's understanding. If he continued to follow other people's understanding, then he would be walking on other people's path. There would be an end to it, and it would be even more difficult to improve in the future. However, if he had his own understanding, then it would be different, because that was the path that was most suitable for him. Chu-Mu had finally stepped onto this path. In his own days, Chu-Mu had walked on this path. If those people in the eagle-flying ship knew that they had not only failed to destroy the giant sword-flying ship and kill the people inside, but had also helped Chu-Mu gain an unprecedented understanding, it was unknown whether they would regret it so much that their intestines would turn green. In the blink of an eye, many days had passed. In the state of becoming one with the ship, Chu-Mu suddenly felt a cold and evil aura fluctuation, which suddenly woke him up and broke away from the state of becoming one with the ship. Tsuyueshi's pretty face was also serious, her beautiful eyes flashing as she stared ahead. It was darkness, like a tide, across the vast sky, entrenched for eternity, immortal and indestructible. Black Demon Abyss. In the firmament territory, it was one of the most dangerous areas, the habitat of the Black Demon race, and a very terrifying forbidden area. The closer he got, the more he felt his own insignificance. That dark and enormous evil aura was enough to make people who were not strong-willed enough tremble in fear, and even collapse. The giant sword-flying ship landed and the ship door opened. Chu-Mu and Tsuyueshi disembarked from the ship one after the other. In addition to Chu-Mu and Tsuyueshi, there were also many flying ships landing around, and people came out one after another, either 1, 2, 3, or even more. Most of these people were of the Nirvana realm, but they were at least at the 5th or 6th layer of the Nirvana realm. Many of them were at the high level of the Nirvana realm, and some of them were at the eternal ancient realm. It had been several months since the 3-star saint, who had won a deep blue divine pearl at the auction, entered the Black Demon pool, and there were many saint-level experts who had chased him into the Black Demon pool. No one knew what the situation was like. As for those who were planning to enter the Black Demon pool, they wanted to try their luck. If they could obtain the deep blue divine pearl and sell it, they could also make a huge fortune. People die for wealth, and birds die for food. This was a truth since ancient times. Although it had long been proven that the Black Demon Abyss was incomparably dangerous, and the Black Demon race was incomparably dangerous. Once discovered, it was better to be killed, but if captured alive, the outcome would be incomparably miserable. However, the temptation of the deep blue divine pearl was too great. In front of them was a stretch of endless darkness that stretched across the entire sky, covering countless tens of thousands of miles. In front of this darkness, Chu-Mu felt oppressed. It was an incomparably spectacular sight. It's too scary. Some people were trembling all over. No, I'm not going in, it's too scary, it feels like I'm going to die. Some people, who had made a solemn vow before arriving at the Black Demon Abyss, were intimidated, scared, panicked, and retreated as soon as they arrived. Tsuyueshi, let's go. Chu-Mu glanced at Tsuyueshi and said. Tsuyueshi did not say a word, but also took a step forward. There were no so-called entrances or exits in the Black Demon Abyss, because at a glance, the entire stretch of darkness that stretched for tens of thousands of miles could be used as an entrance or exit. Chu-Mu and Tsuyueshi took a step forward, quickly heading toward the Black Demon Abyss. They were getting closer and closer to the Black Demon Abyss, and were about to enter it. Kill them! A somewhat sharp voice sounded, and immediately, an astonishing murderous aura surged over, causing Chu-Mu and Tsuyueshi to shiver all over. They quickly reacted, drew their swords, and slashed out. The sword light pierced through the air. No matter how well the flying ship is controlled, it's just a lowly Nirvana realm expert. You're dead. The speaker was a thin man with a goatee. Chu-Mu immediately understood that this person was the controller of the Eagle flying ship, and a hint of anger flashed across his heart. The goatee man's cultivation base was at the 7th layer of Nirvana realm, and the two people who attacked with him were also at the 7th layer of Nirvana realm. The person who ordered them to attack was the so-called young master. He was dressed in a golden-patterned robe, looking very gorgeous, but his complexion was pale, and his cultivation base was also at the 7th layer of Nirvana realm. Next to the young master stood a gray-robed old man, who exuded an aura that surpassed the Nirvana realm. When the pale-faced young master saw Tsuyoeshi's face, his eyes suddenly lit up, and a lustful light flashed. He quickly opened his mouth and shouted, "Kill the man, leave the woman, I want to pamper her." Tsuyoeshi's appearance, figure, and temperament were also one of the top beauties in the deep blue world. The vast majority of men would be moved by her, not to mention those who were originally lustful. "You take one, I'll take two," Chumu said to Tsuyoeshi. 3 7th-layer Nirvana realm experts were nothing in his eyes. Chumu believed that, with Tsuyoeshi's talent and strength, a mere 7th-layer Nirvana realm expert would not be her opponent. Tsuyoeshi did not answer, but expressed it with her actions. In an instant, a touch of black spread out, and a force field covered, directly enveloping a 7th-layer Nirvana realm expert. Under the pressure of the Sky Demon force field, the 7th-layer Nirvana realm expert's face suddenly changed, and his strength was greatly weakened. Tsuyoeshi's sword was merciless. The dark sword light cut across the sky, and with the color of the black demon abyss, it carried an incomparably fierce murderous intent as it charged toward the 7th-layer Nirvana realm expert. The sword light, like a bolt of black lightning, tore through everything. At the same time, Chumu also drew his sword. He did not release a force field, but with his extremely high level of swordsmanship, he casually wielded two swords, which were like killing move. Two silver sword rays broke through the air, and a terrifying sword force bloomed. With two whooshing sounds, they pierced through the forehead of the two 7th-layer Nirvana realm experts, mincing their brains and destroying their souls. Tsuyoeshi's sword also beheaded the third 7th-layer Nirvana realm expert. It was too fast. In just an instant, 3 7th-layer Nirvana realm experts had died under the swords of Chumu and Tsuyoeshi. Damn it! Only then did the saint-level expert of the eternal ancient realm next to the young master react. A terrifying and powerful aura swept over, causing Tsuyoeshi's face to change color. The reaction of a saint-level expert should not have been so slow. Firstly, because this was the Black Demon Abyss, and he had already felt the tremendous pressure. Secondly, the 3 7th-layer Nirvana realm experts should have been able to easily deal with a 6th and 5th-layer Nirvana realm expert, so there was no need to worry. Based on these 2 points, the gray-robed elder did not pay much attention to them, and was mainly thinking about what to do after entering the Black Demon Abyss. It was not until the 3 were instantly killed that he completely reacted and attacked. Chumu had already calculated this point. After killing the 2 7th-layer Nirvana realm experts, he raised the heaven-beheading sword, and a tyrannical 5-colored light poured in and circulated as he slashed out. A 5-colored wheel of light spun rapidly, killing the young master with a single sword strike. This sword forced the gray-robed elder to attack the 5-colored light wheel, otherwise the young master would certainly be killed. "Let's go!" Chumu grabbed Tsuyoeshi's hand, and with a burst of speed, he quickly rushed into the darkness of the Black Demon Abyss. The gray-robed elder shattered the 5-colored light wheel, and caught a glimpse of Chumu and Tsuyoeshi, who had broken into the Black Demon Abyss and disappeared. The young master's face, which was originally pale, became even more unsightly. Just now, he felt that death was approaching. "Kill, the man must be killed, the woman must be captured, I want to torture her to death." The young master's face was ferocious, and in a rage, he rushed into the Black Demon Abyss. The gray-robed elder hurriedly followed. Chapter 1359. Cold, berserk, evil, and boundless negative emotions surged into his body. They seemed to want to freeze his blood and solidify his body. They surged into his spiritual world and mind, creating all kinds of darkness, triggering the heart demon and giving birth to evil. The Black Demon Abyss was a very special environment. So far, no one knew what caused it. Once one entered the Black Demon Abyss, one would be affected by the Black Demon Abyss, be surrounded by the dark and chaotic aura, and be affected by the negative aura of the Black Demon Abyss everywhere. Those who were not strong-willed enough would be obviously affected here. They would not be able to hold on for long, and the darkness in their heart would be aroused. Their inner demons would breed and cause them to fall into madness, and finally die here. Chumu and Tsuyueshi were both strong-willed people, and were not affected. However, the longer one stayed in such a place, the more obvious the effect would be. When they first entered, they were hit by the aura of the Black Demon Abyss. The two of them were momentarily surprised. After they reacted, they realized that when their hands touched, or rather, when Chumu's hand grabbed Tsuyueshi's hand, there was a cold and soft feeling. Tsuyueshi's cheeks were hot and red. This was the first time she felt a little warmth when her hand was grabbed by someone of the opposite sex. The feeling in her heart was very complicated and indescribable. Subconsciously, Chumu let go of her hand. The environment here made the two quickly calm down and enter a battle state. With the sword in hand, there was a faint connection between the man and the sword. The darkness all around oppressed them, and all kinds of negative aura constantly wrapped around their body and drilled into their bodies, but were dispelled by their sword intent and sword yuan. Not knowing where the deep blue divine pearl was, the two could only try their luck. Perhaps their luck was greater than that of ordinary cultivators, and they might encounter it. The deeper they went into the Black Demon Abyss, the stronger the dark and chaotic aura became, and the stronger the impact was. Chumu's willpower was originally very strong, and after the breakthrough in the realm of swordsmanship, it was further improved. His sword intent was powerful, reaching the top of the divine level, and could be said to be at the peak. It was unique in resisting the negative aura. Tsuyueshi's will was not as good as Chumu's, and her sword intent was not as good as Chumu's. However, she had an advantage that Chumu did not have, which was that she was proficient in the law of darkness. She was more adaptable and resistant to darkness. Within the Black Demon Abyss, the vision of both eyes was affected, and the power of divine sense was also disrupted. Not only was the range of release reduced by dozens of times, but it also became intermittent, less accurate, and consumed more energy. Chumu's eyes flickered as he pushed his vision sword to the extreme. He was barely able to see things a few hundred meters away. Any further and his vision would become blurry. Meanwhile, Tsuyueshi's eyes became even darker as if she was performing some kind of eye technique. "We seem to be surrounded." Tsuyueshi's voice was calm with a hint of coldness. Her eye of darkness was more suitable for use in places like the Black Demon Abyss. Although Chumu's vision sword was powerful, it was only a basic eyesight. Affected by the environment, its effectiveness was greatly reduced. As soon as Tsuyueshi's voice fell, Chumu also discovered that there were figures lurking in the darkness all around, and they were quickly surrounding them. The ferocious and violent aura, mixed in the darkness, appeared even more chaotic and turbulent, as if the tide was surging over. There were low beast-like roars, as well as strange laughter, one after another. Immediately, there was the sound of wind breaking as figures rushed out of the darkness, crossing a distance of hundreds of meters at an extremely fast speed, and charged toward Chumu and Tsuyueshi. The attacks brought about bursts of wind-breaking sounds, accompanied by ghost-like wails and wolf-like howls, made people dizzy and easily distracted, causing their strength to decrease. But Chumu and Tsuyueshi both had clear eyes, and did not seem to be affected in the slightest. Naturally, the two had their backs to each other, one in front and one behind, facing the besieging enemies. The metal force field was released, and the 5 elements sharp metal sword was displayed. A golden sword light, tens of meters long, instantly slashed out, cutting through the darkness. Amidst the sizzling sounds, the tall and strong attacking figures were split apart by the golden sword light, and strange and rough screams rose and fell one after another. At a close distance, Chu Mu saw the attacking and surrounding person. There was no hair on its head, and there was a single horn on its forehead. Its eyes emitted a faint black-red light, and its face was ferocious and ugly. Its body was very tall and strong, more than 3 meters tall, and its muscles bulged like rock. It was wearing a crude black armor, and it held a thick black mace in its hand. With a swing of the mace, one's head would be smashed and the body would explode. This ugly and ferocious thing was the Black Demon race. It could be seen that the dozens of Black Demon race members killed by Chu Mu were just low-level Black Demon race members. Their strength was equivalent to the human primary realm, but the Black Demon race members were adapted to the environment of the Black Demon abyss and were not affected in any way. Moreover, their bodies were strong and tyrannical, and were many times stronger than human cultivators of the same level. In one-on-one situations, the Black Demon race members would often win. Only the true geniuses of the human race could kill Black Demon race members of the same level in one-on-one situations. But even if the low-level Black Demon race members were stronger than human primary realm cultivators, they were still no match for Chu Mu. They were like ants, and dozens of them were instantly killed with a sword. Tsuyueshi slashed out with her sword, and the sword tore through the air like a black bolt of lightning, as if it had merged with the darkness of the Black Demon abyss. With one slash, dozens of low-level Black Demon race members were killed. The Black Demon race members had intelligence, but their intelligence was relatively simple, and they were more bestial than rational. They were immediately enraged and let out a terrifying roar. Their aura was violent and they rushed over. Chu Mu and Tsuyueshi then realized that there were hundreds of low-level Black Demon race members surrounding them. Among them, there were dozens of middle-level Black Demon race members. The middle-level Black Demon race members were equivalent to the human Divine Condensation realm, but they were much stronger than the average Divine Condensation realm members. The middle-level Black Demon race members were not as strong as the low-level Black Demon race members. They were only 2 meters tall and not more than 2.5 meters tall. They also had a single horn, but they did not look as ferocious. The armor on their bodies was also much better, and the weapons in their hands were black broadswords or more exquisite maces. Whether it was the low-level Black Demon race or the middle-level Black Demon race, to Chu Mu and Tsuyueshi, they were not enough. Kill, kill, kill. The two people's methods were cruel, and their swords were merciless. The Black Demon race was also a foreign race, and when it came to killing foreign races, the human race had never shown mercy. This was especially true for swordsmen from the 4 major human star domains of the ancient god realm. Each and every one of them had an unforgettable hatred for foreign races. Not long after, hundreds of low-level and middle-level Black Demon race members were all killed by the two people's sword. The mournful roars of the dead Black Demon race members were filled with resentment. The murderous aura and resentment, like a fuse, intensified the special negative aura of the Black Demon abyss. It suddenly became several times stronger, and constantly drilled into the bodies of Chu Mu and Tsuyueshi. It flew into the spiritual world in an attempt to interfere with the will and mind of the two people, and cause them to become crazy. The sword will was high and the light was dazzling. It directly destroyed all the negative aura that invaded the spiritual world. Damned human race, how dare you slaughter the warriors of my race? You deserve to die. A strangely accented but very ferocious roar exploded like thunder. High-level Black Demon race. Chu Mu and Tsuyueshi looked grave. High-level Black Demon race members possessed higher intelligence, and had learned the language of the human race. The power they possessed had reached the level of the Nirvana realm, and was several times stronger than ordinary Nirvana realm humans of the same level. The voice of this high-level Black Demon race member contained a terrifying power, indicating that the rapidly approaching high-level Black Demon race member possessed terrifying strength. Moreover, Chu Mu and Tsuyueshi could feel that there was more than one high-level Black Demon race member. There were more than a dozen other auras that were very violent. They were different from the Black Demon race members, but similar to them. They could be Black Demon beasts. Their speed was extremely fast. By the time the voice sounded, more than a dozen high-level Black Demon race members had already appeared, riding on more than a dozen high-level Black Demon beasts, and had surrounded Chumu and Tsuyueshi. The violent aura surged like a wave, madly attacking. More than a dozen high-level Black Demon race members were less than 2 meters tall. Some of them had a bald head with a single horn, and some of them had black hair in addition to their horns. Their pupils were black and red, which was very strange. They exuded a ferocious aura, and within that ferociousness, there was also a trace of wisdom. The Black Demon race members were more bestial than rational. However, the higher the level of the Black Demon race, the higher their intelligence. Sometimes they could suppress their bestial nature and let their rationality take over. Having a powerful force was not scary. Having a powerful force and having the wisdom to control it was what made people despair. High-level Black Demon race members were the most frightening existences. Below the high-level Black Demon race were more than a dozen high-level Black Demon beasts. Each of them had the strength of the Nirvana realm. Their bodies were completely black, and they looked like tigers or leopards. However, their bodies were larger than black bears, and they were emitting a violent and shocking aura. These high-level Black Demon clansmen were wearing a complete set of exquisite battle armor. In their hands they held powerful long spiked maces, huge sabers, long spears, and so on. Some of them were wearing sinister boxing gloves that were covered with hooks. Chumu sensed that these high-level Black Demon race members were at least equivalent to the fourth sky of the Nirvana realm. 2 of them were the most powerful, equivalent to the 7th sky of the Nirvana realm. However, their bodies were very strong and their strength was terrifying. At the 7th sky of the Nirvana realm, they were comparable to ordinary 8th sky of the Nirvana realm cultivators. The Black Demon beasts they were riding were at least at the 4th sky of the Nirvana realm. The most powerful one was at the 6th sky of the Nirvana realm. Chumu and Tsuyueshi were in danger. What a beautiful human girl! Take her back. I want to enjoy her. One of the 7th sky of the Black Demon race laughed strangely. Although they could speak the human language, their accent was strange, and it sounded very awkward. That's right. Take her back alive. We'll take turns to enjoy her. The other high-level Black Demons laughed strangely. We have to take this human male back and present him to Master Seiji. She will definitely appreciate him. Not only did Tsuyueshi become a target, Chumu also became a target. Chapter 1360. Chumu and Tsuyueshi were surrounded by a dozen powerful Black Demon clansmen and a dozen powerful high-level Black Demon beasts. They were in a critical situation. The enemy's aura was extremely violent, causing the negative aura around them to become even denser and more chaotic. At this time, the high-level Black Demon clansmen let out a strange sound. Chumu and Tsuyueshi couldn't understand this sound, but they could feel that the dark aura around them seemed to be attracted and gathered around them. From the appearance of the high-level Black Demon clansmen to them attacking Chumu and Tsuyueshi, only a few breaths of time had passed. Chumu and Tsuyueshi had a tacit understanding. They turned around and attacked with their swords. The metal force field was released, only covering the front without affecting Tsuyueshi. The 5 elements sharp metal sword slashed out, then immediately switched to the water force field. The imperishable sword performed the 5 elements flowing water sword, alternating with each other again and again. Tsuyueshi also released the dark force field, performing an ordinary secret art. The black sword broke through the void like a bolt of lightning, carrying a horrifying evil aura. The 2 attacked with powerful secret arts that didn't require any accumulation of power, intending to interrupt the enemy's strange chanting. Chumu attacked with 5 different colored sword light. The power of the sword light was extremely terrifying. Suddenly, a few Black Demon clansmen gave up their chanting and attacked, resisting Chu-mu and Tsuyoeshi's secret arts. A horrifying power burst out, and those black demon clansmen were immediately pushed back. Their blood and chi were shaken, and they were injured. However, the black demon clansmen's physique was extremely terrifying. They were not inferior to body refiners at all. Under the shock, they were only injured but not killed. At this time, those black demon clansmen had finished their chanting. Under the strange tone, countless chaotic dark aura surged out and surrounded Chu-mu and Tsuyoeshi. The two's vision turned dark and everything disappeared. They couldn't see, hear, and even feel. Their 5 senses seemed to have been deprived. Chu-mu pushed seeing, listening, and touching to the extreme, but it only had a weak effect. He could vaguely see a blurry figure, hear a weak voice, and feel a weak wave. Tsuyoeshi was even worse off. Although she was proficient in the law of darkness, the means of more than a dozen high-level black demons had obviously exceeded the limit of her law of darkness. Her 5 senses were severely affected, and she could only vaguely sense Chu-mu behind her. Tsuyoeshi. Chu-mu called out softly. I'm here, Tsuyoeshi said softly. Can you feel it? Chu-mu asked. No. Tsuyoeshi's answer was simple and direct. Be careful, Chu-mu said. Be careful, Tsuyoeshi said. Vaguely, Chu-mu felt something approaching. He slashed out with the heaven-slashing sword, and the silver sword light was swallowed up by the darkness. Chu-mu felt his sword tremble as it collided with something hard. Tsuyoeshi was also attacked, and she dealt with it with her own ability. More than a dozen high-level black demons tried to capture Chu-mu and Tsuyoeshi alive, but they did not use their full strength. They only wanted to injure them and capture them alive. Chu-mu and Tsuyoeshi tried their best to defend. Under such circumstances, it was obviously advantageous for the black demons and unfavorable for the two of them. After many attacks, Chu-mu heard Tsuyoeshi's muffled groan. She was obviously injured. But under such circumstances, Chu-mu could only defend with all his strength and release the sword realm. He could not take care of Tsuyoeshi at all. Several attacks came at once. Chu-mu barely blocked a few, but he missed one and was punched in the shoulder. A sharp pain made his body shake. He felt suppressed and almost deprived. Even his senses were greatly affected. On the other hand, the black demons were not affected at all. If their goal was not to capture Chu-mu and Tsuyoeshi alive, Chu-mu and Tsuyoeshi would have been seriously injured or even killed. A sense of powerlessness lingered in the hearts of the two. This feeling was even worse than facing a saint-level expert directly. Facing a saint-level expert, they could at least use their full strength. Even if they could not win, they could still fight. But under such circumstances, their strength could not be used effectively. They were very depressed and could not see any hope at all. A violent aura surged, which surprised Chu-mu because it was Tsuyoeshi's aura. Chu-mu was very close to her, and he could feel it clearly because their backs were touching. Tsuyoeshi, what are you doing? Chu-mu shouted. He could not help but recall the last battle between him and Tsuyoeshi during the Supreme Seat Challenge. She would rather die than live in dishonor. Could it be that this time, in order to not be captured alive? Tsuyoeshi did not answer, but her aura surged. There was a kind of determination. Tsuyoeshi, don't give up. Chu-mu's voice was full of power. If Tsuyoeshi did this before, he would most likely not care. But after a few months of getting along, the two were familiar with each other and could be considered friends. At least Chu-mu thought so. Trust me. Not knowing whether to continue or to believe in Chu-mu, Tsuyoeshi's aura gradually weakened. Just as Chu-mu was speaking, the two were attacked several times and were both injured. Stupid human, the human race is the best plaything. While the dozens of high-level black demons attacked, they spoke from time to disturb the minds of the two. Their strange tone was erratic and unpredictable. The huge pressure constantly attacked the two. If it were other people, they would have already collapsed under this situation. Tsuyoeshi's decision was not because she had collapsed, but because she felt that she could not hold on anymore. She also did not want to drag Chu Mu down, so she planned to die together with him. Previously, Du Qian of the Wind Whisper Tower had said that if a human woman was captured alive by the Black Demon clan, her fate would be extremely miserable. She would be defiled and killed. For a human woman, this was 100 times more terrible than death. No normal human woman would be able to accept it. The huge pressure made Chu Mu almost suffocate. The pressure of the dozens of high-level Black Demon clan's tyrannical power, the pressure of survival, and the pressure of stopping Su Yueshi from dying together with him. The greater the pressure, the calmer Chu Mu became. His whole person, under the huge pressure, began to enter an inexplicable state. The sword in the heart, a brilliant state of swordsmanship, once again played a magical role. Chu Mu's thinking, essence, qi, spirit, and consciousness were all improved. The 5 states of swordsmanship, sword observation, sword vision, sword hearing, and sword touch, had already reached the highest level of perfection and could be used together. In addition, under the situation where his 5 senses were almost deprived and his senses were greatly suppressed, under the huge pressure, Chu Mu vaguely had a strange feeling. It was as if the 4 states were about to merge and make a new breakthrough. Following his heart, the aura of his whole person was also undergoing subtle changes. The sound of Su Yueshi being injured again seemed to be far away. The attacks seemed to be fleeting and illusory. Even if the body was hit, the pain seemed to be weakened a lot and was not so real. There was a feeling of his soul being out of his body. The world seemed to have changed. Speaking of the 5 states of swordsmanship, Chu Mu had already reached the peak of the first 4 states. However, he could not break through the 5th state. He had never heard of anyone breaking through the 5th state. There was no way and he did not know what to do. The breakthrough of swordsmanship, the enlightenment of his own. Now that he was in such a special situation, the huge pressure made Chu Mu calmer. All the power on the spiritual level was highly unified in the spiritual world. The sword intent controlled everything and was detached from the body. It was as if his soul was out of his body. Under this strange feeling, Chu Mu's eyes became dim, as if they had lost their function. His ears could not hear any sound and he could not feel any aura flowing through his pores. However, the dozens of high-level black demons and high-level black demonic beasts were clearly perceived by Chu Mu. The 5th state of swordsmanship, sword intent, the highest and most mysterious level of the 5 states of swordsmanship. It was a level that no one had reached since the birth of swordsmanship. Finally, Chu Mu comprehended it and reached it. The feeling of comprehending the sword intent was very wonderful. It was also wonderful to be in this state. He could not see, hear, or touch anything. However, everything existed under his unique perception. There was no place to hide. The dozens of high-level black demons were there. Their every move was completely under Chu Mu's control. Su Yueshi, protect yourself. I'm going to make a move. Chu Mu said. His voice became ethereal like the whisper of a god. As his voice fell, Chu Mu moved. He was no longer passive like before. Instead, he took the initiative to attack, which made the high-level black demons stunned. At the moment when they were stunned, a dark sword light with traces of silver light appeared in front of a high-level black demon. It was unable to dodge and the sword pierced through its head. Kill. Under the effects of the sword intent, Chu Mu's combat strength was unprecedentedly strong. He wandered in the darkness and killed one person with his sword. The high-level black demons and high-level black demonic beasts could not withstand his sword. In this state, Chu Mu could clearly feel every move of the black demons and black demonic beasts. When they made the intention to attack, Chu Mu could clearly feel the opponent's attack trajectory and calmly dodge. Then, he could also feel the opponent's dodge trajectory and easily hit the opponent. Under the coverage of the sword domain, the strength and speed of the black demons and black demonic beasts were affected. Even the high-level rank 7 black demons died under Chu Mu's sword. Kill, 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 Kill. Chumu was very happy. On the other hand, the black demons were miserable. One by one, they were killed by Chumu's sword. When the last black demon was killed by Chumu, the darkness that covered the surroundings quickly dissipated. Chumu and Tsuyueshi's vision returned to normal. Chumu also came out of the sword in tense state. He only felt pain all over his body. Looking at Tsuyueshi, she also looked a little embarrassed. Her clothes were torn and there were many wounds. Chapter 1361. The Black Demon Abyss was a place where the aura of darkness was strong, chaotic, and all kinds of negative aura could easily affect the mind. It was also home to the terrifying black demon beasts and the black demon race. It was a forbidden area. But now the peace of this forbidden area was broken because of a dark blue divine pearl. The black demon race had sensed the arrival of the human race and had moved out in an attempt to capture the human race. For a time, the black demon abyss was filled with the sound of wind and cranes, and danger was everywhere. Under the tremendous pressure of life and death, Chumu finally stepped out of the last step of the 5 realms of swordsmanship, successfully transcending the first 4 realms, and comprehending the 5th realm of sword will. And the power of the 5th realm of sword will did not disappoint Chumu, and could even be said to be a pleasant surprise. Under the sword will, even if his 6 senses were deprived, he could still perceive everything around him. Although he could only cover a radius of tens of meters, it was enough. Any movement of the enemy was completely within his grasp. As soon as there was an intention to attack, Chumu knew the trajectory of the opponent's attack. As soon as there was an intention to dodge, Chumu could also be the first to know the trajectory of the evasion. Although it was only a moment in advance, for an expert, a moment was enough to decide a lot of things. The originally extremely unfavorable situation was reversed because of the sword will. The robe on his body was tattered, but his injured body was quickly healed. The repeated nirvanic reincarnations had made the vitality contained in Chumu's flesh and blood more powerful, and his self-healing effect had significantly increased. Coupled with the help of the origin of the wood form in his heart, Chumu's injuries were completely healed in a short time. On the other hand, Tsuyueshi was not so lucky. Her injuries were more serious than Chumu's. The robe on her body was a treasure, but it was already damaged. The damaged parts revealed her sparkling and translucent skin, some parts were purple, and some were dripping with blood. Tsuyueshi quickly took out a pill and took it, then crushed some and sprinkled it on her wounds to speed up the healing of her injuries. However, with the help of pills, the speed of recovery was still relatively slow. The Black Demon Abyss was also very dangerous. If the injuries were not completely healed, the display of one's strength would be affected. Chumu pointed a finger at Tsuyueshi from a distance, and a wisp of green brilliance shot out from his fingertip. Tsuyueshi sensed it and was slightly startled, but did not dodge. When the green light entered her body, Tsuyueshi couldn't help but let out a slight groan. It was a very comfortable feeling. A wisp of coolness quickly flowed through her body and gathered at each of her injuries. Her injuries were recovering quickly. Green light constantly shot out from Chumu's fingertips, forming a chain and entering Tsuyueshi's body, helping Tsuyueshi to quickly heal her injuries. After a period of time, Tsuyueshi's injuries were completely healed. If it weren't for the tattered robe on her body, she wouldn't have looked like she was injured at all. "I want to change my clothes." Tsuyueshi's voice was cold. The treasured robe on her body was damaged and could no longer play a defensive role. Moreover, it was broken and ugly. For a woman, it was unacceptable, so it had to be changed. Chumu turned around, and Tsuyueshi's body shook. The broken treasured robe disappeared, and was replaced by a purple gauze robe, exquisite and beautiful. More than a dozen high-level Black Demon race members all had space rings. Chumu wanted to share them with Tsuyueshi, but Tsuyueshi refused. Chumu took them himself, further expanding his wealth. Continuing to move forward, Tsuyueshi looked at Chumu's back, her heart complicated. Chumu had become even stronger. Once again, he had left her even further behind. The black demon abyss was vast, and there were many black demon beasts residing there. The black demon race was the most powerful race. This time, there were many humans who entered, and fierce battles broke out everywhere. The battles between humans and black demon race members. The battles between humans and black demon race members. At this time, in the darkness, there was a figure emitting a faint white light, floating about 3 inches above the ground. Although the white light was weak, it was very tenacious and was not affected by the darkness at all. Instead, it forced the darkness back more than 3 feet. In the faint white light, a figure could be seen. He was dressed in a white robe, which was different from the robe of the human race. It looked more complex and exquisite, with long silver-white hair and a fair and handsome face, enough to make most women scream. In the light aura, there was a trace of emptiness and holiness, like the pure sky, which could not tolerate the slightest stain. It was incompatible with the aura of the black demon abyss. Evil life, in front of my eyes you have nowhere to hide. Purify all of you. The eyes of the unbelievably handsome man flashed with white light. He stretched out a finger and gently tapped the dark void. Suddenly, a white light shot out, penetrating hundreds of meters of darkness and hitting the black demon race members. The black demon race members burst into white flames, burning fiercely, and turned into ashes amidst screams. There's a saying, no matter what, this young master has finally met you. The young man with a pale complexion stared straight at Tsuyueshi's beautiful face with a pair of lustful eyes, almost drooling. Looking at you up close, you are indeed more beautiful. This is the first time I have seen such a beautiful and seductive beauty. Tsuyueshi's face was cold, a trace of anger gathering in her eyes. The gray-robed elder next to the young master stared at Chu-Mu with eyes full of killing intent, as if to freeze Chu-Mu. Young master, you step back first, I will capture these two, the gray-robed elder said. Kill the man, leave the woman, the young master said excitedly, retreating a distance. Tsuyueshi, leave the old one to me, Chu-Mu said indifferently. The gray-robed elder was a saint-level expert. If they were outside the black demon pool, Chu-Mu would certainly run as far away as possible. The current him did not have the slightest ability to fight against a saint-level expert. But this was the black demon pool, where any power beyond the nirvana realm would be suppressed. No matter what level of saint-level expert the gray-robed elder was, he was now at most equivalent to the 9th layer of the nirvana realm. As long as it was a nirvana realm expert, Chu-Mu was not afraid, and even if he was not, he could still fight. And Tsuyueshi's attack was enough to kill the lecherous young master. A mere 5th layer of the nirvana realm, you think you are invincible just because you have a little talent. Let me take you today. The gray-robed elder smiled coldly and immediately attacked. He stretched out his hand and turned it into a palm, grabbing forward. A huge fiery red palm viciously grabbed at Chu-Mu. A blazing aura rippled. The huge fiery red palm was full of terrifying power, and under this blow, there was a suffocating feeling. From this move, one could see the strength of the gray-robed elder, which was comparable to the 9th layer of the nirvana realm. If it were any other nirvana realm expert, they would most likely die. Chu-Mu's eyes flashed, and a silver light suddenly appeared. On the heaven-beheading sword, there was a silver light flowing, and the 8th level of sword power emitted an astonishing sharpness. That's right, it was the 8th level of sword power. After the breakthrough in the sword realm, Chu-Mu comprehended and cultivated, gained the experience of the 5 spirits sword saint, and comprehended the eternal sword momentum. The 7th level of sword power finally broke through again, reaching the 8th level. The 8th level of sword power increased the power of the sword by 9 times, which was a very terrifying increase. Even many high-level sword saints may not be able to master this level of sword power. With the sword realm in his heart, coupled with the preliminary understanding of the sword will, the huge fiery red palm was very clear in Chu-Mu's eyes. It turned into dots, and connected together to form the palm. The heaven-beheading sword stabbed out, and in a breath, hundreds of swords with terrifying silver light pierced out of the darkness. Hundreds of silver sword light were extremely sharp, and at the same time, stabbed at the various nodes of the fiery red palm. Chu Mu rushed out, and the aftermath of the fiery red palm seemed to be filled with smoke. His sword cut through the darkness, and slashed towards the gray-robed elder. When the gray-robed elder was about to capture Su Yueshi alive, the huge fiery red palm was shattered, and a cold sword light came towards him, which shocked him. His expression changed slightly, and he unsheathed his sword, which drew a fiery red arc and slashed out with raging fire. The sword of raging fire cut through the air, and the silver cold sword light went over the sword of raging fire and stabbed towards the gray-robed elder. In terms of swordsmanship, even though the gray-robed elder was a saint-level expert, there was a huge gap between him and Chu Mu. Realizing this, the gray-robed elder immediately pulled away from Chu Mu and used a technique to attack Chu Mu. Flames circled around his body to protect him. Soon after, under the guidance of a single hand, fire snakes condensed and danced in the air, shooting towards Chu Mu from all directions. With the imperishable sword in his left hand, he swung both swords, and each sword shattered the fire snakes. As his figure moved, he rapidly approached the gray-robed elder. Chu Mu felt a thrill in his heart. This feeling made him very comfortable, and that was killing the gray-robed elder, a saint-level expert. Although the strength of this saint-level expert was suppressed due to the uniqueness of the Black Demon Abyss, and could only exert the strength of the ninth heaven of Nirvana level, but in any case, his true realm was still at the saint level. Killing a saint-level expert would have a great effect on Chu Mu's essence, chi, and spirit, and would be of great help to his future progress. Su Yueshi also made her move. Her target was the lecherous young master. Although the young master's cultivation base was at the seventh heaven of Nirvana level, and his talent was not bad, but he was addicted to women, and was not outstanding in battle. He simply could not be compared to Su Yueshi. The gray-robed elder had to take care of both the battle with Chu Mu and the rescue of his young master. Carefree, unrestrained, and free to do as he pleased, Chu Mu's sword appeared and disappeared unpredictably. Strong, domineering, strange, swift and fierce, light, ethereal. Different sword styles were all performed under Chu Mu's sword and slowly merged. When the sword was slashed out, there was a domineering force that could shatter everything, but also a sharp edge that could cut through all things. When the sword was thrusted out, there was a sharpness that could penetrate any hard object, but also an unfathomable strangeness. The state of the sword in the heart, the experience of the sword techniques of the five spirits sword saint, the comprehension of the constant sword momentum, and the initial dabbling in the sword will, at this moment in the battle with the expert, were all controlled by the sword will to a high degree. In terms of absolute power, the gray-robed elder was far superior to Chu Mu, but that was all. In other aspects there was no comparison at all. The powerful and tyrannical technique attacks all missed, and were all dodged by Chu Mu. In the state where his essence, chi and spirit were beyond the limit, Chu Mu was unprecedentedly powerful. Kill, kill, kill. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill the gray-robed elder, kill the saint-level expert. The two swords intersected and changed. One sword was strange and swift, the other was strong and domineering, yet light. The cross slashed down. Chapter 1362. Su Yueshi's power erupted, evading the gray-robed elder and releasing the sky demon force field. Her sword turned into a bolt of black lightning, as though it had merged with the black demon abyss, and slashed toward the lascivious young master. The lascivious young master's face changed dramatically, and he hurriedly retreated, but was unable to dodge and was struck by the sword. He did not die, because there was a faint purple light shield on his body that blocked Su Yueshi's sword. Ha 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 ha! I have a secret treasure that my father gave me, you can't kill me. The lascivious young master finally reacted, laughing loudly, and was very pleased with himself. Tsuyoshi did not say a word, and once again launched an attack with her sword. In terms of cultivation, she was not as good as the lascivious young master, but in terms of strength, she was many times stronger than him. If not for the protection of the secret treasure, she would have killed him with one strike. The gray-robed elder saw that Tsuyoshi was unable to do anything to the young master, and immediately felt relieved. He was determined to get rid of Chu-mu as soon as possible with the power of thunder. Although he constantly attacked, he still could not kill Chu-mu, and could not even hurt Chu-mu. Although the gray-robed elder was a saint expert, he was just a relatively ordinary member of the saint realm. Even so, the gray-robed elder still had a tyrannical strength that was far superior to Chu-mu's, and was an excellent opponent for him to practice his sword on. With killing the gray-robed elder as his goal, Chu-mu's swordsmanship was sublimating. He had only just begun to comprehend the sword intent, and in fact, could not be said to have mastered it. The situation when he killed more than a dozen high-level black demon race experts was just that, under tremendous pressure, he had just comprehended it, and it was difficult for him to reach that level after calming down. That level of sword intent should have been cultivated to the level of Deshang, and now he was just at the beginning. This battle had deepened Chu-mu's grasp of sword intent. The gray-robed old man was extremely depressed. The moment he attacked, the other party had already dodged in time, causing his attack to miss. When the other party's sword came at him and he dodged, the next attack was waiting for him to hit the trajectory of his dodging. The strange opponent made the gray-robed elder feel a chill in his heart. "Stop!" The gray-robed old man retreated as he shouted. He didn't wish to continue fighting. Such an opponent caused him to feel a chill in his heart. "This old man is an elder of my Violet Thunder Palace, and he is the young lord of the Violet Thunder Palace. If you continue fighting, it would only be disadvantageous for you." The Purple Thunder Palace was a massive faction in the Firmament territory. There were many sacred rank experts in the palace. However, the gray-robed elder wanted to stop the battle and even threaten them like this. How could Chu-mu let them go? In reality, even if they stopped the battle now, the gray-robed elder and the lascivious young master wouldn't let them go after they left. Since that was the case, he had to get rid of them completely. As soon as the gray-robed old man finished speaking, Chu-mu arrived with his two swords. The two swords each had the characteristics of berserk: unyielding, domineering, light, strange, sharp, and so on. Everything was integrated into the swords, making them unpredictable and indescribable. The gray-robed elder's face was filled with horror. The two swords were the best of Chu-mu's swordsmanship and Deshang's work. The sword light seemed slow, but it was fast. In an instant it arrived. The gray-robed elder hastily dodged, but Chu-mu already knew his dodging trajectory. The two swords that were slashing towards him were already in front of him at some point. This time, the gray-robed elder was unlucky. It was as if he had run into the swords himself. The terrifying sword radiance, under the amplification of the 8 times sword force, broke the defense of the gray-robed elder. The ferocious earthquake force, the terrifying power under the profound vibration, the power of the two swords had reached the extreme. Although the gray-robed old man was wearing a treasured robe, it was still only a saint-grade robe. It shattered and the terrifying energy invaded his body. If his strength hadn't been suppressed, he would have been able to block it. But now that his strength was suppressed, he was heavily injured by the two swords. Not giving his opponent any chance, Chu-mu's figure moved at an extremely fast speed. He circled the gray-robed elder and launched an unparalleled attack. He attacked with an indomitable will. With a poochie sound, a head flew high into the air. The gray-robed elder's eyes were filled with shock. He was a Saint Realm expert. Even if his strength was suppressed to the 9th level of the Nirvana realm, his courage and battle experience were all at the Saint Realm. However, He died at the hands of a sword cultivator who was merely at the 5th level of the Nirvana realm. With the death of the gray-robed elder, only the lascivious young master was left. His defense was also broken by Tsuyoeshi's sword. The next sword was a fatal blow. The sword slashed out. Abruptly, a terrifying aura gushed out from the horny young master's body, akin to an erupting volcano. Crackling sounds rang out as countless bolts of purple lightning covered his entire body. A silhouette then condensed on his body. I am Yang Tianlei, the palace master of the Purple Thunder Palace. No matter who you are, please do me a favor and don't hurt my son. The figure condensed from purple thunderbolts let out a bell-like sound. His body also released a terrifying aura. If someone from the Firmament territory or knew about the Purple Thunder Palace, they would most likely do him a favor. After all, the Purple Thunder Palace was one of the few most powerful forces under the Firmament Holy Land. It was not easy to provoke them. Even the people of the Firmament Holy Land would not easily provoke them. When Chu-Mu and Tsuyoeshi asked Du Qian about the Black Demon Abyss, Du Qian also mentioned the major forces of the Firmament territory, and the Purple Thunder Palace was one of them. Provoking the Purple Thunder Palace would end badly. Tsuyoeshi was a little hesitant. She looked at Chu-Mu. Unknowingly, Chu-Mu became the leader of the two. Tsuyoeshi would consider Chu-Mu's thoughts and his feelings. Kill. Chu-Mu only said one word. He was very resolute and decisive. So what if it was the Purple Thunder Palace? Even if it was the people of the Firmament Holy Land, Chu-Mu would still kill them. Even if he did not kill them, the other party would never let them go. Tsuyoeshi's sword trembled and once again turned into a black thunderbolt. She slashed out. Chu-Mu's two swords crossed and collided, bursting out a terrifying sound wave. The cross-sword light cut in all directions. You still dare to attack. Under the image of the Purple Thunder Palace Master, thunderbolts surged wildly and turned into two terrifying thunderbolts, bombarding Chu-Mu and Tsuyoeshi. Tsuyoeshi's sword was hit and she was sent flying. Thunderbolts covered her body. Although Chu-Mu's sword light was shattered, his body was not affected. He attacked again. From this point, it could be seen that he was much stronger than Tsuyoeshi. The image of the Purple Thunder Palace Master was, after all, a protective measure. No matter how strong it was, it could not exceed the suppression of the Black Demon Abyss. It was a huge threat to Tsuyoeshi, but to Chu-Mu, it was not much different from the gray-robed elder. Fight, fight, fight. The battle with the gray-robed elder had made Chu-Mu's swordsmanship sublimate and his strength further increased. It was now easier to deal with. The protective measure left by the Purple Thunder Palace Master on the lecherous young master was, after all, limited in energy and could not last long. In the confrontation with Chu-Mu, it accelerated the consumption of power. You deserve to die, the Purple Thunder Palace will hunt you down. At the last moment before the image of the Purple Thunder Palace Master dissipated, he let out an angry roar. A tiny thunderbolt shot toward Chu-Mu and entered Chu-Mu's body. It did not cause any harm, but Chu-Mu had a feeling that something was wrong. It was more like a mark. Don't kill me. The lecherous young master panicked. I won't kill you. Chu-Mu put away his sword, smiled slightly, and checked the thunderbolt power that entered his body. I will thank you. The lecherous young master trembled, but a haze flashed across his eyes. I will kill you. The cold voice seemed to freeze the lecherous young master's blood. Tsuyoeshi's sword turned into a black light and pierced through. The reason why Chu-Mu did not kill him was not because he was soft-hearted, but because he left it to Tsuyoeshi. The gray-robed elder's space ring belonged to Chu-Mu, and the lecherous young master's space ring belonged to Tsuyoeshi. In this battle, Chu-Mu had consumed a lot of power and needed to recover. Tsuyoeshi had also consumed a lot of power and needed to recover. You recover first, Chu-Mu said, taking out some pills to help recover his power. In addition to taking pills, Tsuyoeshi sat cross-legged and operated her cultivation technique. The yuan qi of heaven and earth in the black demon abyss was very thin, and it was very difficult for human cultivators to recover once their power was consumed. They must prepare enough pills, but pills were not omnipotent. Tsuyoshi was of the heavenly demon lineage, and her cultivation technique was related to darkness. She could absorb part of the dark power of the black demon abyss to accelerate the recovery of her power. Under the effects of the pills and the dark power of the black demon abyss, Tsuyoshi's power quickly recovered, but she had to be careful not to be eroded by the chaotic will. After a period of time, Tsuyoshi's power recovered, and it was her turn to protect Chu-Mu. Because of the pills, Chu-Mu's power had recovered a little. At this time, he sat cross-legged and operated the Divine Wilderness Sword Manual. Speaking of which, this was one of the strengths of the Divine Wilderness Sword Manual. As Chu-Mu's cultivation of the Divine Desolate Sword art deepened, as his realm deepened, and as he improved, the Divine Desolate Sword art's secrets became more and more unearthed. Right now, it was one of those secrets. It could absorb most of the aura energy and refine it into Divine Desolate Sword energy. The dark power could not escape the absorption range of the Divine Wilderness Sword Manual. Therefore, Chu-Mu's speed of recovery was faster than Tsuyoshi's. Coupled with his tyrannical sword intent and tenacious will, the chaotic impact of the dark aura could not affect him. While Chu-Mu closed his eyes and operated the Divine Wilderness Sword Manual to recover his power, Tsuyoshi looked around, and her gaze seemed to inadvertently fall on Chu-Mu's face. Looking and looking, she seemed to be fascinated, but also seemed to be distracted. As soon as Chu-Mu opened his eyes, he saw a pair of beautiful eyes staring at him. When their gazes met, it was as if he had been caught. A look of panic flashed across her beautiful eyes, and she quickly looked away. "I've also recovered." Chu-Mu got up with a smile on his lips. Tsuyoshi nodded, slightly lowering her head, and did not look at Chu-Mu. "Why don't we check the harvest?" Chu-Mu said. The harvest referred to the spatial rings obtained from killing more than a dozen high-level black demons, the gray-robed elder, and the perverted young master of the Purple Thunder Palace. Chapter 1363. In the depths of the black demon abyss, there was a terrifying aura surging. It was darker and more astonishing than the aura of the black demon abyss. 8 kings, listen to my order. Capture all the invaders and execute them on the spot if you can. The astonishing voice was loud and clear in the darkness. It was incomparably domineering, as though a high and mighty emperor was giving orders. "Yes, your majesty." In the darkness, there was a different domineering voice. "Cg, I heard that many of your high-ranking clansmen were killed," the rough voice said with a hint of mockery. "You are not much better." The voice was astonishingly charming, as though it was whispering in one's ear. It was as though it could trigger lightning and fire. "Hee, why don't we have a competition to see who can capture more foreign races? If you lose, don't play any tricks and let me have a good time." The rough voice laughed strangely. "Do you have the guts?" The charming voice laughed again and again. "If you dare to lie down, I dare to do it." The rough voice snorted coldly. "Well, now is not the time to quarrel." A flat voice sounded, containing an inexplicable chilling power. The 8 kings of the black demon race had moved out. Chu-Mu and Tsuyoshi inspected their respective spoils of war. Tsuyoshi had only obtained the space ring of the young master of the Purple Thunder Palace. Although there was only one, the space ring of the lecherous young master really contained a lot of good things, including some life-saving secret treasures, some good pills, and a large number of yuan pills. Chu-Mu had obtained more than a dozen space rings, one of which was the space ring of a saint-level expert. These things gave Chu-Mu a huge harvest. In the space ring of the gray-robed elder, there were millions of high-grade yuan pills, tens of millions of middle-grade yuan pills, and many pills, ores, and so on. There were also some cultivation techniques and secret manuals, which were relatively common and practical things. There were many things inside the spatial rings of the high-level black devils. It was obvious that the high-level Black Devils had killed the outsiders and taken their wealth. However, it was now Chu Mu's. There were elixirs, swords, and other items. There were also some special items, such as some black stones that emitted strong waves of dark aura, which seemed to be a specialty of the Black Demon Abyss. They were a type of Black Demon stone that was suitable for the Black Demon race to absorb and restore their strength. In the spatial rings of a dozen high-ranking Black Devil species, Chu Mu also found a peculiar item. It was a fiery red ring. The ring was embedded with a few grain-sized fiery red gems. Between the gems, there were veined patterns connecting them, making them look very intricate and complicated. Traces of the power of fire were emitted from it, and the air around the ring seemed to become scorching hot. Chu Mu carefully examined it a few times, and his divine sense penetrated into it. From his perspective as a sword craftsman, the structure of this thing was very complicated and not simple at all. He estimated that it was a kind of secret treasure related to the power of fire, but he was not sure what kind of secret treasure it was. Putting it away for the time being, Chu Mu also found a few pieces of crystals that were emitting an astonishing evil qi, which made him delighted. He directly absorbed them into his body and into his middle dantian, where they were rapidly absorbed by the indestructible sword. The indestructible sword had not absorbed such a strong and pure negative aura for a long time. Although the negative aura of the Black Demon Abyss was everywhere, it was not enough for the indestructible sword at this level and could not be improved. The strength of the indestructible sword could not be compared to the heaven-beheading sword in all aspects, but now that there were a few pieces of crystals with such strong evil qi, Chu Mu believed that after absorbing them, the indestructible sword would be improved to a whole new level. Su Yueshi stood to one side. She did not understand what Chu Mu was doing, but did not ask. Instead, she stood and paid attention to all the movements around her, acting as a protector. Chu Mu's previous body was strong enough to withstand the impact of the two evil qi crystals. The indestructible sword continued to absorb the evil qi, absorbing nutrients and growing on its own. After a period of time, all the evil qi crystals were completely absorbed by Chu Mu. The indestructible sword vibrated for the second time, and a strong aura rippled, exuding from Chu Mu's body. It contained an everlasting and indestructible aura, which made Su Yueshi's face change slightly, and her heart trembled. "I'm done, let's go." Chu Mu opened his eyes, glanced at Su Yueshi, and said softly. Very quickly, the evil qi crystals were all absorbed. The reward was that the indestructible sword had been upgraded to the level of the heaven-beheading sword. Heaven-beheading indestructible sword. Finally, the indestructible sword had also been upgraded to the level of the heaven-beheading sword, and the power it displayed was even more powerful, which indirectly increased Chu Mu's strength. With the 8 kings of the Black Demon clan on the move, the humans from the outside world were in an even more dangerous situation. The humans had already figured out the structure of the Black Demon clan. The Black Demon beasts could be said to be the vassals of the Black Demon clan, and they were the mounts and battle pets of the Black Demon clan. The Black Demon clan was divided into the low-level Black Demon clan, the middle-level Black Demon clan, and the high-level Black Demon clan. Within each level of the Black Demon clan, there were low, middle, and high-level Black Demon clan. Especially the high-level Black Demon clan, which corresponded to the human cultivators, had a total of 9 levels. Perhaps this was the division that the humans had given to the Black Demon clan. Just like the human cultivators, there were relatively more black demons from the 1st to the 7th level, and there were very few 8th level black demons. In the Black Demon clan, they were called Black Demon Generals. As for the 9th grade Black Devil clan, there were even fewer of them. Every high-level 9th grade Black Devil clan possessed incomparably terrifying strength. They could easily defeat a 9th-level Nirvana stage expert of the human clan, and were known as Black Devil Commanders. As for the most outstanding 8 of them, they were crowned with the title of King, Black Devil King. At present, there were 8 kings in the Black Demon clan. And above the 8 Black Demon kings, the strongest person who ruled the entire Black Demon race was the Black Demon Emperor. He was the emperor of the Black Demon clan, and any Black Demon clan member must also obey his orders. The human cultivators were not clear about how powerful the Black Demon Emperor was. They only knew that any cultivator who entered the Black Demon abyss, regardless of their talent or strength, would not be able to fight against a Black Demon King, let alone the Black Demon Emperor who was above the Black Demon Kings. In fact, from what the human race knew, the Black Demon Emperor had never made a move. Chumu and Tsuyueshi did not know that the 8 Black Demon Kings were on the move, but Chumu smelled a crisis, or rather, he felt the arrival of a crisis. This was the result of him advancing to the state of having a sword in his heart. His spirit, chi and spirit had increased, and his thinking and consciousness had improved. After comprehending the sword intent, he had achieved a sublimation under the high degree of unification of sword intent, and his awareness of crisis had increased a lot. Tsuyueshi, next, we may encounter a huge crisis. Be careful. Chumu did not know why, but he said, "Yes." Tsuyueshi nodded gently. Ahead, there was a faint white light, which slightly surprised Chumu and Tsuyueshi. Amidst the dark aura of the Black Demon Abyss, the faint white light was very conspicuous. They also felt that the aura contained in the faint white light was a little holy and ethereal, which easily reminded them of the clean and clear sky. The faint white light was moving rapidly toward them. It was a living creature. A feeling of being spied on made Tsuyueshi frown. Chumu used the power of his divine sense to shake off the other party's undisguised spying. His first impression of the other party was directly reduced. Approaching, within the faint white light, the figure was clearly seen by Chumu and Tsuyueshi. The unusually handsome appearance was clearly different from that of the human race, which startled them. The other party did not speak, and just brushed past Chumu and Tsuyueshi. His aloof posture, cold eyes, and a glance, as if he was looking at a lower life form, had a trace of contempt. No one liked to be looked down upon like that. But this person gave Chumu and Tsuyueshi a very dangerous feeling, even though there was not the slightest dangerous aura. Since the other party did not make a move, Chumu would not make a move either. Tsuyueshi hesitated for a moment, suppressing the idea of making a move. If she encountered such a situation in the past, she would definitely pull out her sword and slash, but now she would consider more. Weak. Human race. The unusually handsome person, under the faint but tenacious white light, left such a sentence. Such an attitude, however, made Chumu reveal a strange smile. Arrogant. Divine race. Chumu said faintly. The man's eyes emitted a bright light, as if piercing through the darkness, as if to shatter Chumu's mind and enter Chumu's eyes. Chumu's eyes also emitted an astonishing sharpness, and when they collided, it was as if there were invisible arcs of electricity sputtering out. Live well. The unusually handsome person of the divine race left these words, and then left. He definitely did not say this out of concern, but as a warning, a threat. Live well, leave this place, and then come looking for trouble. Would Chumu be afraid? No. He was even a little excited, because ever since he learned about the divine race in the Sky-Bearing Academy, he had the idea of meeting them. What was so special about this race that was named after heaven? Sure enough, as recorded, the people of the divine race were very arrogant, and their aloof gaze and attitude looked down on other races. Chumu did not care about pride and arrogance. For him, it was just a superficial thing. What he really cared about was strength. Without strength, arrogance would only invite ridicule. After meeting the people of the divine race, Chumu and Tsuyueshi quickly put this matter to the back of their minds. They went deeper into the Black Demon Abyss, relying on luck to find the deep blue divine pearl. But until now, other than knowing that the deep blue divine pearl was in the black demon abyss, there was no other news. But the black demon abyss was a dangerous place, a very dangerous forbidden area. Even if they could not find the deep blue divine pearl, they could still train here. Training between life and death was the best way to improve. For example, in the few battles now, Chumu had improved a lot, and Tsuyoshi had also gained a lot. The sense of crisis was getting clearer and stronger. Chumu felt that, perhaps soon, he and Tsuyoshi would encounter a great crisis. This not only did not make him retreat, but instead made him feel excited, and his blood showed signs of boiling. Chapter 1364. When he was still an ordinary person, Chumu had an extraordinary intuition. After becoming a swordsman, along with the improvement of his cultivation, his will and other aspects, especially after he cultivated to the 5th level of swordsmanship, his intuition was further enhanced. Since then, he had never made a mistake. Chumu also believed in his intuition. Sure enough, Chumu's intuition was accurate again. He and Tsuyoshi were trapped in a tight encirclement. They were still surrounded by the Black Demon clansmen, but this time, the Black Demon clansmen were many times more powerful than the last time. The terrible dark aura was like a surging tide, rushing over, making Chumu and Tsuyoshi feel that they could be destroyed at any time. Tsuyoshi's pretty face was dignified. "Wait a minute, listen to me. Run when I say run." Chumu tried to calm his mind as much as possible, and transmitted a message to Tsuyoshi. Tsuyoshi nodded. This time it was really different from the last time. Although there were only a dozen Black Demon clansmen surrounding them, every one of them was a high-level Black Demon clansman. The leader of the Black Demon clansmen was even more terrifying. The black horn was suffused with black light. The face that did not look ugly was covered with strange black lines, and the black pupils were a little strange. He was wearing a complete black armor that protected every part of his body below the head. The weapon in his hand was a strange long weapon, with a spear tip and a double axe blade that could stab and slash. The high-level Black Demon clansman was sitting on a high-level Black Demon beast that had huge fangs and looked like a lion. It was at least at level 8. As for the aura that the high-level Black Demon clansman emitted, Chumu knew that he was a level 9 high-level Black Demon clansman, which was the commander of the Black Demon clan. A commander of the Black Demon clansmen had brought Chumu great pressure and a strong sense of crisis. The commander of the Black Demon clansman's aura locked onto Chumu, making Chumu's muscles go numb and his blood freeze. This feeling was very uncomfortable. The pressure that the commander of the Black Demon clansman brought to Chumu was several times greater than that of the gray-robed elder. This kind of pressure was very great, and it made Chumu excited from the bottom of his heart. A strong enemy, an absolutely strong enemy. Only by fighting with such a strong enemy would he be able to better hone himself and develop his potential. The only thing worth worrying about was Tsuyoshi. She had the talent and was a monstrous genius. However, she had yet to fully mature. It was unrealistic for her to face a Black Demon commander and a dozen high-level Black Demons. Tsuyoshi had her own pride, but she would not be reckless. If there was a chance to escape, she would not refuse. However, with more than 10 high-level Black Demons surrounding him, it wasn't easy to escape. He needed to open a gap and find a chance to escape. "Human, you had better return with us obediently. Otherwise, you will die a horrible death." The commander of the Black Demons could see the disparity in strength between the two sides, so he was not worried at all. Instead, he spoke in a mocking tone. It could be seen that the intelligence of the commander of the Black Demons was comparable to that of a human. "Sure." Chumu suddenly smiled and agreed. His straightforwardness made the commander of the Black Demons slightly stunned. In the next moment, a sharp sword light shone in front of him, tearing through the sky and slashing towards him. The sharpness and coldness of the sword light made the commander of the Black Demons shiver. He did not dare to underestimate it. Cunning human. The commander of the Black Demons felt that he had been deceived. He was furious. He waved the long weapon in his hand, and a sharp piercing sound came whistling through the air. It was fast and ferocious, as if this stab could pierce through the sky. As soon as the commander of the Black Demons made his move, Chu-Mu was shocked. It was too strong. This attack was much stronger than that of the gray-robed old man from before. The entry-level sword intent let Chu-Mu know that he could not take this attack head-on. The sword light changed direction as if it was jumping through space. It dodged the commander of the Black Demon's stab and stabbed towards one of his eyes. "Run!" At the same time, Chu-Mu transmitted a voice to Tsuyoshi. Tsuyoshi also took advantage of the momentum lock that had been broken in an instant. She had long been ready to slash out. The pitch-black sword light drew an arc in front, spanning dozens of meters, as if it was cutting through the sky. It produced a tyrannical explosive force that blocked the high-ranking Black Demons that were rushing over. As soon as the sword came out, Tsuyoshi made a prompt decision. Under the eruption of power, her body turned into a black rainbow light, as if blending into the dark aura of the Black Demon abyss, and rapidly retreated. She was proud, but she wasn't blind. She knew that she would only be a burden to Chu-Mu if she was here. Even if she was unwilling in her heart, she wouldn't lose her reason and do the wrong thing. However, in her heart, she swore to herself that she would increase her strength as fast as possible. Otherwise, if she were to encounter such danger again, she would only become a burden again. After the dozen or so high-ranking Black Demons were slightly hindered, they immediately chased after her, leaving only Chu-Mu and the Black Demon commander to fight. The Black Demon commander brought Chu-Mu a lot of pressure. Chu-Mu had to deal with him wholeheartedly. Now, he simply had no time to take care of Tsuyoshi, and could only rely on her own ability and fortune. The sword light pierced through the air, incomparably swift and fierce, like lightning and thunder. The Black Demon commander's spear, axe, and slash were exerted to the extreme. Coupled with his terrifying strength, every strike was able to shatter a mountain. It was impossible to resist. Under the collision, the terrifying impact of the force was mostly dissipated by Chu-Mu, but the remaining force still made Chu-Mu's palms numb. The gap between the absolute strength of the two sides was too great. Chu-Mu used all his strength to fight, but the Black Devil commander didn't seem to be using all his strength. However, he was extremely astonished in his heart. A human whose aura was only equivalent to a fifth-stage high-class Black Devil could actually fight him to this extent. He was definitely a peerless genius of the human race, and it was more meaningful to capture him alive. With a thought, the Black Demon commander's moves immediately changed. Spear shadows crisscrossed, black light filled the air, and a creepy whining sound was heard. Every move was aimed at capturing Chu-Mu. The sword intent allowed Chu-Mu to predict the opponent's attack trajectory in advance, and could also predict the opponent's dodging trajectory. In the previous few battles, it was always successful. This time, the sword intent still played a big role. However, Chu-Mu felt a sense of helplessness. The Black Demon commander's absolute strength surpassed his by too much. His attack speed was also increased to an astonishing level under the support of tyrannical strength. So what if he could predict the opponent's attack trajectory? It was difficult to dodge because the opponent's attack speed was too fast and ferocious. It was very difficult to dodge. So what if he could predict the opponent's dodging trajectory? Even if the opponent could not dodge, he could still use the weapon in his hand to block the attack, and he would not be injured at all. This was the so-called, one strong person can defeat 10 skilled people. Under the absolute huge gap in strength, the power of exquisite techniques was limited. It only allowed Chu-Mu to fight with the opponent now. After releasing the sword domain, the Black Demon commander's strength and speed were weakened, while Chu-Mu's strength and speed were increased. Under this situation, Chu-Mu recovered from the disadvantage. But the Black Demon commander's strength was too tyrannical. Even if it was weakened, it was still not something that Chu-Mu could resist. The Black Demon Beast under him cooperated with the Black Demon Commander, putting Chu Mu in danger several times. The enemy was too strong. Unless his cultivation reached the 7th Nirvana layer, he would not be able to kill the Black Demon Commander. Thinking of this, Chu Mu could see that the situation was very unfavorable for him. Although it was good to have a strong opponent, the time and place were not right. If he continued to fight, once reinforcements arrived, it would be even more disadvantageous for him. On the sky beheading sword, there were traces of silver light jumping. A terrifying aura spread out as the sword slashed out. High-grade secret art. Void Nirvana sword. Insignificant skill. The Black Demon Commander used a strange voice to say the words that he had learned from the human race. He swung his spear and axe with both hands. Light filled the air as whistling sounds rang out. It was as if ghosts were crying and wolves were howling. The dark aura was drawn over and poured into the spear and axe. The aura grew stronger and stronger. When the spear was swung out, it was as if it wanted to shatter the sky. It directly shattered the Void Nirvana sword light. A terrifying energy swept out. Chu Mu slashed out with the 5 elements revolving sword again. After slashing at the Black Demon Commander, he retreated. The 5-colored sword light of the 5 elements revolving sword was also shattered by the Black Demon Commander's spear and axe. However, it managed to block the Black Demon Commander for a while, giving Chu Mu time to quickly retreat. Chase! The Black Demon Commander roared. He patted the Black Demon Beast he was sitting on and ran wildly, chasing after Chu Mu. He wanted to capture this human alive. Under the absolute difference in strength, he had been tricked by this human time and time again. Now, he even wanted to escape. How could he tolerate this? Chu Mu went all out and exploded to the extreme. He turned into a silver sword light and tore through the sky, rushing in the direction that Tsuyueshi had left. After a while, Chu Mu saw Tsuyueshi fighting with 10 high-level black demons. On the ground, there were 3 corpses of high-level black demons. Obviously, they were killed by Tsuyueshi. Chu Mu was slightly stunned. Of the 13 high-ranking black devils chasing Tsuyueshi, 1 was at the 8th stage, 2 were at the 7th stage, 4 were at the 6th stage, and the remaining 6 were at the 5th stage. Of the 3 that were killed, 1 was at the 6th stage and 2 were at the 5th stage. Tsuyueshi was a monster. With the cultivation of the level 6, killing ordinary level 7 was as easy as chopping vegetables. However, the level 7 of the Black Demon Clan was not something ordinary level 7 could compare with. However, in a one-on-one situation, Tsuyueshi could also kill them. However, she was facing 1 level 8, 2 level 7, and many level 6 and level 5 black demons. Under such circumstances, she could still kill 3 people and was fighting fiercely with the others. For a moment there was a stalemate. This made Chu Mu very surprised. Soon, he found that there was something wrong with Tsuyueshi. There was a faint black flame in her eyes. It seemed that she had used some kind of secret technique. Her power erupted again and her speed increased. Her 2 swords spread out like wings and swept across. At an extreme speed, she rushed past a level 7 black demon. With a flash of sword light, she killed and rushed into the battlefield. In front of him, a sharp black sword light slashed. Chu Mu was shocked and quickly dodged. The other high-level black demons also attacked. Tsuyueshi seemed to have lost her consciousness. She was only fighting instinctively. Anyone who approached her was an enemy. With such a delay, the Black Demon Commander also caught up. Tsuyueshi. Chu Mu transmitted his voice. His voice was like wind and thunder, exploding in Tsuyueshi's spiritual world and awakening her consciousness. Tsuyueshi's figure paused. Chu Mu extended his hand, wanting to grab Tsuyueshi. Unexpectedly, the Black Devil Commander arrived. A black light flashed like lightning. Chu Mu could only push Tsuyueshi away. His 2 swords crossed, and he released Sword Domain to take the Black Devil Commander's attack head-on. With a ping, he was sent flying several thousand meters away. Tsuyoshi, who just woke up, felt her body go soft. She could not escape. A black light wrapped around her and she was captured.